Thank you. On this vote, the yeas are 246, the nays are 164. The joint resolution is passed. Without objection, the motion is considered laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, that it adjourn to meet at noon on Monday next for morning hour debate and 2 p.m. for legislative business.
Without objection.
The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor Kathy Herod.
The gentleman will suspend. The House will be in order. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today to honor Kathy Herod, who recently retired from the Center for Arizona Policy after serving 20 years as president. Kathy dedicated her life's work to promoting and defending the sanctity of life, traditional marriage and families, and religious freedom. She joined CAP in 1997. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you. Kathy joined CAP in 1997, shortly after its founding as Legislative Counsel. Upon retirement of CAP's founder, Lynn Munsell, in 2005, Kathy assumed the role of president and has since been a force for good at the Arizona Capitol. Since CAP's founding, more than 200 pieces of CAP-sponsored legislation has been passed by the Arizona legislature, including many that protect the unborn and protect mothers. Kathy has received numerous awards and distinctions for her work. She was recognized by Arizona newspapers as one of the 10 most influential leaders at the Arizona Capitol. She received the Family Champion Award from Focus on the Family and received the William Wilberforce Award from Students for Life America. I'm grateful for the work of dedicated individuals like Kathy, who relentlessly strive to promote policies that protect the dignity of every Arizonan. I wish Kathy well in her much-deserved retirement, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek gentlewoman from Georgia? Oh. For what purpose does a gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from North Carolina will be recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to join millions of American women in condemning Trump's attempt to gut funding for women's health research. The Trump administration has rescinded women's research projects at an alarming rate. These projects include life-saving research on early breast cancer detection and so much more. Trump even shut down the Women's Health Initiative, our nation's largest and most consequential women's health study. Millions of women's lives are at stake. That's why I led my Democratic Women's Caucus colleagues in demanding that Trump immediately reverse course. I'm relieved to announce that the administration heeded our call and the heartfelt appeals of our constituents and restored this crucial funding. But this fight is far from over. The Trump administration is waging a war on science and on women. We must stay vigilant, and we will fight back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Miss Joan Quarterman, a remarkable woman who has dedicated 52 years of service to the city of Savannah. As a longtime employee of the Leisure Services Bureau, she played a vital role in shaping the lives of countless children and families. For decades, she was a beloved figure at Hull Park, leading summer programs that provided a safe, welcoming space for young people to learn, grow, and have fun. Through games, activities, and free lunches, she ensured that every child felt valued and supported regardless of their background. Ms. Quarterman was more than just a city employee. She was a mentor, she was a role model, and a constant presence in the life of many. Her kindness, her patience, and dedication left a lasting imprint on our community, and her impact will be felt for generations to come. Her work reflects the very best of public service, selflessness, commitment, and unwavering devotion to others. Today, we congratulate Ms. Quarterman on her well-earned retirement and thank her for more than 5 decades of service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Georgia yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
I want to honor the incredible life and legacy of my dear friend George Saba, who served Metro Detroit's immigrant community for over 4 decades as a Board of Immigration Appeals accredited representative. George would walk in a room with this big smile, and everyone would smile back. George dedicated his life to reuniting thousands of families, first at the International Institute of Metro Detroit and later at Access, always bringing compassion, warmth, and unwavering commitment. He was born in Ramallah, and George was proud of being Palestinian and his heritage, and actively was involved with the American Federation of Ramallah, working to preserve and pass on his culture to future generations. His work transformed lives, and his presence brought comfort and strength to so many. On behalf of the 12th Congressional District, we extend our deepest sympathies to his beloved wife, Intadal, his children, Paul, and his daughter, Janan, and his late dear son, Amjad, and his entire family and friends. May his legacy live on, and his memory continue to be a blessing and a source of strength. Allah yarhamu. Thank you.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revised and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from South Carolina will now be recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, the United States and Ukraine signed the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. Underscoring the alliance of our countries, the agreement provides Ukraine a credible deterrence. David Zimmerman and National Review reported the agreement gives the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals for a promised security guarantee to protect Kyiv from future Russian aggression, signaling President Donald Trump's commitment to ending the war. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent elaborated, quote, "This agreement signals clearly to Russia that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term." In conclusion, God bless our troops as the global war on terrorism continues. Open borders for dictators puts all Americans at risk of more 9/11 attacks imminent, as warned by the FBI. Trump is reinstituting existing laws to protect American families with peace through strength, revealing war criminal Putin lies as he insults President Truth with fake ceasefire, murdering civilians yesterday in Odessa. Congratulations, Ambassador Warren Stevens, on being sworn in as America's ambassador to the United Kingdom. I yield back.
With that, the gentleman from South Carolina yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from North Carolina will be recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate the talented
artists of North Carolina's 1st Congressional District who participated in the 2025 Congressional Art Competition. I was honored to host a ceremony recognizing over 30 dynamic, talented high school artists. I especially congratulate our first place winner, Valerie Jacobson of Martin County, for her piece, The Unbothered Sister, inspired by her sister. I also applaud our second and third place winners, Addison Rich of Nash County and Reagan Green of Greene County. And a special thanks goes to every participant for their involvement in an extremely competitive competition. Their artwork reminded me that the future is bright and colorful in eastern North Carolina. These young artists are a true reflection of the heart and spirit of the East. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from North Carolina yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I request to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Michigan will be recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life, service, and memory of Staff Sergeant Troy Smith Knutson Collins. On April 1st, a month ago today, Staff Sergeant Knutson Collins tragically lost his life during a tactical training exercise in Lithuania that also killed 3 other members of the 3rd Infantry Battalion. Troy was born and raised in Battle Creek, Michigan, graduating from Harper Creek High School in 2015. And Troy had many hobbies, including woodworking and football and gaming. After graduating high school, he actually played semi-pro football before he enlisted in the Army at age 20, where he served as an artillery mechanic. Staff Sergeant Troy Smith Knutson Collins was deployed to Korea twice and was serving in Lithuania when tragedy struck. In honor of his service, he will be returning back home to Battle Creek and be buried at the Fort Custer National Cemetery tomorrow on Friday. Troy is survived by his wife and 5 children, along with his parents, Robert and Tasha Collins, and 6 siblings. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask that we may all rise in honor of the memory of Staff Sergeant Troy Smith Knutson Collins with a moment of silence. Rest well, soldier. Rest well. Thank you.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for up to 1 minute and extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the recent Valor Award winners and honorees from Fauquier County, individuals who embody courage and service. Sponsored by the Fauquier Chamber of Commerce, the Valor Awards highlight the critical work local law enforcement and first responders do every day to keep our communities safe. And among this year's Lifetime Achievement Awards was Warrenton Police Chief Tim Carter. A native of Fauquier County, Chief Carter has served his hometown as a police officer, a corporal, detective sergeant, lieutenant, and deputy chief before becoming police chief in 2023. Also recognized with the Lifetime Achievement Award was retired Fire Chief Dale Coughlin. Chief Coughlin served the Warrenton Volunteer Fire Company for 62 years, first joining when he was only 14 years old. Another award went to Sergeant John Larson, who donated a portion of his liver to a child after screening said that he was a good match. And George Shulin was honored for his courageous service as a platoon leader in the Army. To the Valor Award winners and honorees, and to those who work to keep our communities safe every day, thank you for your service. I yield back.
The gentleman from Virginia yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, President Trump, Indiana Governor Braun, and House Republicans in our first 100 days have worked in unison to make our communities safer, our citizens healthier, and our country wealthier. It has started at the border. The Trump administration's swift and strong actions have caused illegal aliens to simply give up on crossing our borders illegally, proven by the 94% drop in apprehension since March of 2024. These efforts have only been strengthened by Governor Braun sending the Indiana National Guard to the border and the House passage of the SAVE Act. Governor Braun has made Indiana healthier by signing 9 health-related executive orders, one of which addresses the same harmful food dyes and artificial ingredients that President Trump and the administration banned this past week. This was accomplished while the House literally saved lives by securing medical protection for babies that survived attempted abortions. Finally, the three have worked in unison in making our country wealthier by both executives implementing their own DOGE initiatives and the House working overtime to codify those cuts. There is so much more I can mention, but the best of all of this is that it's just beginning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll yield back.
The gentleman from Indiana yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to recognize May 2nd as Non-Ketotic Hyperglycemia Awareness Day. NKH is a rare genetic disorder, and there are only 500 kids in the world living with it. 4 of them call the Commonwealth of Virginia home. Today, I'm proud to be joined by one of these incredible kids. My constituent, Luca, and his family, Jackie and her dad, Eddie, are also important advocates in Virginia dealing with this disease. At one of my town halls, Luca's mom shared their story with me. It was a story where Medicaid was at the center. Without reliable Medicaid, Luca would not receive his 18 daily medications, at-home care, and other resources he needs. His mom and dad, Shannon and Chris, work full-time jobs and Medicaid as a backup insurance. By establishing May 2nd as NKH Awareness Day, we raise awareness for this devastating disease and recommit to fighting for a reliable Medicaid. Because every family should be focused on spending time with their loved ones, not worrying about health care. I yield back.
The gentleman from Virginia yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to address the House chamber and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the emergency isn't coming, it's here. Donald Trump is abducting American children, he's detaining judges, he's disappearing people into foreign prisons. This is authoritarianism in full view. I didn't come to Congress to sit back while democracy is dismantled. To the contrary, I will use every tool at my disposal to protect our democracy. When the people of Gresham, Hood River, and Portland demanded action, I went to El Salvador because we have to stand up for due process. And as a critical care physician, I am trained to act. I am trained to do everything in my power to address the crisis in front of me. When we sat down with the U.S. Embassy, one thing was chillingly clear. Donald Trump has done nothing, not one thing, to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia or any of the detainees home. Their families haven't heard a word, no calls, no updates, no proof of life, just silence. But here's what gives me hope. Yesterday, Mohsen Madawi, a detained Columbia student, was released on bail, and he said something we all need to hold close. We must believe in the inevitability of justice. I will stand for justice. I encourage my colleagues to stand for justice, and I look forward to the fight ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Oregon yields her time. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
I request unanimous consent to address the House and to extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to recognize Adeline Ferguson as Ohio's 13th Congressional District Champion of the Week. Adeline is a junior from Portage Lakes Career Center in Uniontown, Ohio, and out of nearly 50 participants, she took home the first place prize for this year's Congressional Art Competition in Ohio's 13th District. I had the opportunity to see Adeline's winning piece shown here and present her with the first place prize at a community art show in Akron last week. I can truly say that her piece titled entitled Lollipop, is a captivating and creative portrait of Adeline's beloved grandmother, Annette. I had the pleasure of meeting Adeline and Annette, and as you can see, Adeline uses bright, exciting colors that showcase her grandmother's beauty and bright smile. As the winner of our district's congressional art competition, Adeline's artwork will be proudly displayed on the walls of the Capitol, where visitors from across the United States and the world can see our community's artistic and creative talent. I personally can't wait to see Annette's smiling face each time I walk to vote on the House floor. In addition to recognizing her exceptional artistic challenge, I'd also like to thank Amy Ebel, Adeline's art teacher at Portage Lakes Career Center. Art teachers like Amy's inspire and support young artists and students like Adeline each day, and we are grateful for their dedication and hard work in the classroom. Congratulations again to Adeline on being the winner of Ohio's 13th Congressional District Art Competition and this week's Champion of the Week. I look forward to seeing what Adeline and other talented student artists in our district create next. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Ohio yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to share a story of a constituent and a friend, Shane. Shane has a rare and painful disorder that makes the skin incredibly fragile, and there's no cure. Thanks to breakthrough gene therapy, one Shane helped to test, he and others finally have hope, but that hope is diminishing. At Trump's urging, congressional Republicans are proposing a nearly $1 trillion cut in health care and have already slashed rare disease funding by over $1 billion. They're blocking a policy that would allow Medicaid to cover out-of-state care essential for families with children or loved ones with this rare condition, especially since so few hospitals specialize in rare diseases. Shane lives in Cincinnati, so he has Cincinnati Children's Hospital. But with these cuts, services at Children's will be undermined. Shane told me recently, I want to use whatever time I have left to help others with this and other rare diseases. I just wanted to come to the floor today to say thank you, Shane. We're fighting for you, we're fighting with you, and every family that's facing these terrible decisions with these health care cuts. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to bring attention to yet another decision by the Trump administration that puts Americans' lives at risk. On April 1st, 2025, almost the entire Division of Blood Disorders and Public Health Genomics, a department of the CDC established to combat blood infections in the wake of the AIDS epidemic, was placed on administrative leave. This decision to eliminate this division was, of course, made by the Elon Musk Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Now, people with blood disorders across the United States will have to worry about contaminated blood transfusions. They will also be left wondering whether critical research to prevent and treat their conditions will be abandoned. And they will have to reckon with the fact that the same government that swore to help them turned its back on them, all so that Republicans can find more money to give billionaires new tax breaks. Vital programs like the Division of Blood Disorders should not be subject to political games, and those suffering from blood disorders should not have to fear that a blood transfusion will kill them. Defunding the CDC puts lives at risk, and staff put on administrative leave should be reinstated immediately. I yield back.
The gentleman from Illinois yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to support California's right to clean air. Growing up in Southern California in the 1980s, smog alerts were a regular part of life. A lap around the track at school and your chest would burn. We can't go back to those days. When President Richard Nixon signed the Federal Clean Air Act in 1970, California, under Governor Ronald Reagan, was given a waiver, letting us set stricter air pollution rules than the federal government. Over the years, Republican and Democratic leaders alike, from Governors Reagan to Jerry Brown or Arnold Schwarzenegger, stood together to protect California's right to clean up our air. But now House Republicans are trying to strip away California's ability to set our own air pollution standards. So much for states' rights. After all the progress we've made, they want to turn back the clock and do the bidding of the big polluters. Clean air is not a partisan issue. It is a public health issue, and I will never, never stop fighting to protect it. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from California yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with immense joy and gratitude to celebrate the upcoming grand opening of the new Wayman Palmer YMCA in Toledo, Ohio. The event dedication will take place on May 12th. This new facility is more than a building. It's a beacon for enjoyment, a hub of our community, and a promise to our children, families, and neighbors that community life thrives in the heart of Toledo. For decades, the Wayman Palmer YMCA has been a pillar of the Warren Sherman neighborhood. And with this new state-of-the-art facility where federal funds attracted local funds, and I thank Mayor Kapsakevich for joining in this great effort, the YMCA will reaffirm our commitment to the health, wellness, and future of the heart of our community. This center will not only offer world-class fitness and recreation, it will also provide vital programs for youth development, mentorship, and enrichment. Every child who walks through those doors knows they are welcome. I congratulate the City of Toledo and feel greatly honored to be able to join with all of the council members and citizens for the upcoming groundbreaking. It will bring renewed hope with the dawn of spring, and I hope to be a party to planting new trees around the region and to celebrate the beginning of spring 2025. Congratulations to all. Thank you.
The gentlewoman from Ohio yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
I ask to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the third time to call for funding for global emergency food aid to be restored. For years, USAID funded the production of ready-to-use therapeutic foods at Udeja Nutrition in my district. The food that was manufactured there had been shipped across the developing world, saving the lives of 25 million children since 2010, until funding for new orders was halted by the Trump administration earlier this year. But this is not just about saving lives. This food aid has also strengthened America's national security and commercial interests. In the same country where this ready-to-use food has saved the lives of children, the United States relies on cooperation on a range of issues, from counterterrorism to access to critical minerals. When the administration pulled back on this food aid, China and our other adversaries were happy to swoop in to win hearts and minds across the developing world. Our nation is safer and more competitive as a result of our goodwill toward others. And so I rise for the third time to urge the White House and my colleagues in Congress to restore funding to protect America's leadership. And I yield back.
The gentleman from Rhode Island yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. New federal economic data came out yesterday, and it showed that in the last 3 months, the U.S. economy shrank by 0.3%. This is a sharp reversal from the 2.4% growth the economy experienced in the last quarter of 2024. This now is the worst economy that a president has had in their first 100 days since President Nixon. Despite promises candidate Trump made that he would lower costs on day one, prices remain high and in fact, it's expected that prices can rise by 6.5% by year's end. Trump policies are why prices remain high, even though he's tried to pin this on former President Biden. The red light, green light tariff policies have caused uncertainty in all sectors of our economy and internationally. Wall Street and Main Street alike have been sending signals for weeks that they do not like or trust those economic plans. The stock market has dropped almost 9% and lost $4.5 trillion in wealth. This is hurting everyday Americans, including people in Westchester and the Bronx. President Trump, you are the president now. This is your economy. Own it, fix it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I return my time.
The gentleman from New York yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today to honor the victims of the horrific car crash that occurred in Chatham, Illinois on Monday afternoon. Alma Brunner Kempe, Catherine Corley, Ainsley Johnson, and Riley Britton. As we mourn the 4 children killed in this unthinkable tragedy, it is hard to find the words to describe the magnitude of our grief. It is a loss that no parent, no family should ever have to endure. Please join me in praying for them and for the swift recovery of those that were injured. I'm grateful to the first responders who rushed to the scene, and for the school staff, faith leaders, and volunteers who have stepped up to assist our community in the aftermath. As we struggle to come to terms with this loss in the days and weeks ahead, I pray that our community can continue to lean on each other and begin to heal. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Illinois yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
I seek to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks as needed.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Michigan will be recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize an incredible individual who was taken from this world far too soon. My dear friend, Molly McGovern, the daughter of Congressman, my colleague, our colleague, Jim McGovern, and his beautiful wife, Lisa, and the sister of her very delightful brother, Patrick. I love all the McGoverns, but Molly was special, and Molly was very much my friend and someone who I loved watching live life. Despite a very rare cancer diagnosis, Molly's light just shined so bright. She made me, even as a member of Congress, feel special. I watched her go abroad. I let her push me to do fun things, spending every single night of the Democratic convention with her and her parents. Molly, you're going to be so missed, but your memory and your impact and who you are as an individual will live on. We will take care of your brother. We will watch out for your parents. And my friend, I will continue to toast you with an Aperol Spritz. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Michigan yields back. The chair now lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir, pursuant to Section 4703B of the Barry Goldwater Scholarship and Excellence in Education Act, 20 U.S.C. 4703, I am pleased to appoint the following member to the Board of Trustees of the Barry Goldwater Scholarship and Excellence in Education Foundation. Representative John B. Larson of Connecticut. Signed sincerely, Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic Leader.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is now recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Minority Leader of the House.
And still I rise, Mr. Speaker. And still I rise with my cane in hand, so feared, this cane, by many of my colleagues across the aisle. Feared to the extent that they would conclude that it might be more than a cane. But that's simply what it is, Mr. Speaker. And I rise with my cane in hand because it is the staff and rod that comforts me. I rise with my cane in hand because, quite frankly, I just believe I have the right to have a cane. So I rise today to speak on several different topics, and as a result, I will move from one podium to another to present these various topics. I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to address the issue of fidelity to sycophancy emanating from the presidency. Fidelity to sycophancy emanating from the presidency. I just recently saw, and many of you saw it as well, members of the cabinet, persons meeting with the president in the Oval Office. I never thought I would see persons holding such high and lofty positions, pledging fealty, not to the presidency as much as to sycophancy. Fealty. It was just unbelievable. The only time I saw anything similar to this was when I was in communist China, and I was with a group of very young children, babies, maybe 5, 6 years old at most, and they were all seated in a line, and they all behaved in a similar fashion when called upon. I saw persons with lofty positions, each of them there, I thought, to give the president a report about conditions related to their various areas of expertise and the departments that they are associated with. That's what I thought. Silly me. They were there to pledge their fealty on national TV to the President of the United States of America. It was a sad sight to see. Each person telling the President how great you are. Dear brothers and sisters, and I say brothers and sisters because I think we're all related, one race, the human race. But dear friends, Mr. Secretary of State, Madam Attorney General, don't let him steal your self-respect. Don't let him take your decency as it relates to your humanity from you. You are allowing him to reduce you to a less than. I will speak for you. Mr. President, you are demeaning the humanity of the people who are in service to this country. And I will speak for them and tell you that if I were in that room, I would walk out. I would not sit there and allow you to demean me in that fashion. At some point, you've got to grow the spine. Those of you who are in that room, grow the spine, grow the will, grow the determination to stand up. Be the person your family expects you to be. Be the person the country wants you to be and needs you to be. Don't become a rubber stamp for this president. He doesn't deserve that level of loyalty. And finally, on this topic, at some point, each of you in that room will have to account for what you have done. I don't mean in a violent way. I just mean that at some point on the infinite continuum that we call time, you're going to have to account for those times. And the question won't be how loyal were you to the president. It will be whether you stood on principle when you had an opportunity to deal with the great issues of your time related to this country. There will be a day of reckoning for you. not in terms of harm to you physically, but in terms of your reputational risk being codified so that those who look through the vista of time will see what you did and did not do at this time. And still I rise, Mr. Speaker, proud to have this opportunity to speak in this almost sacred place. Proud to have the opportunity to address a topic of paramount importance to the American people. Proud to acknowledge a colleague who has taken a very bold stand. A colleague who has engaged in a form of protestation that will not always be received initially with the kind of respect that it merits. But as I have said before, dear friends, when you engage in protestation, when you protest and you get in the way, as the Honorable John Lewis put it, when you protest and you get in the way, there will be consequences. So you must be prepared to suffer the consequences when you get in the way. When you protest, you must. Now, you don't have to like the consequences, but you have to be prepared to suffer the consequences when you get in the way. So today, I want to acknowledge my colleague, a member of Congress who filed articles of impeachment. I am proud of him. I salute him. I applaud him for what he has done. He too is laying the groundwork for impeachment. I said some time ago now that this president would be impeached again. I said some time ago that I was going to bring articles of impeachment. And I'm proud to know that there are others who are now joining in this effort to impeach this president. I am very proud of what this congressperson has done. Trelanda, your articles of impeachment, HRES 353, are historic. I'm going to mention them as such because do not expect the networks, maybe there might be one or two that'll say something positive and bring you on. But don't expect it because they give you all of the rationale for impeachment, but they don't want to see it happen. Unfortunately, there are people like you who have to put principle above politics. I have your articles in my hand. Principle above politics. And understand, my dear brother, that when you put principle above politics, you're doing what the American people want you to do. Because the American people, at this time, when we are confronting a crisis related to our democracy, the hue and cry is not for you to always win. For those who believe that you only fight when you win, you're not going to win the hearts and minds of the American people. The American people want to know if you will fight even though you may not win. Will you fight? Will you fight and put everything on the line? That's what the American people are interested in when we hold these positions of public trust. So don't despair when people say to you, this is not the time. The time is always right to do what is right. That's Dr. King talking. The time is always right to do what is right. You did the right thing. And because I'm confident and believe in what you've done, I'm signing on to your articles of impeachment. Add my name to your articles of impeachment. I'm proud of what you have done because you have put principle above politics. And still I rise, Mr. Speaker. And I rise at this moment in time to preview my articles of impeachment. To preview, not to present, but to preview my articles of impeachment. And before giving this preview, I'd like to thank a couple of people. There are many that I should thank, but there are a couple that I will thank. I'd like to thank a couple of people for what they have done in assisting me with these articles of impeachment. My dear friend John Boniface, who has been with me from the genesis of this, when we brought articles of impeachment against President Trump previously, laid the foundation for it. When people said it can only be done if certain things exist, and then later on retracted all of that when they were ready to move forward, or had to move forward, to be quite candid with you, because the momentum have shifted and it built up to the extent that you had notables like the Honorable John Lewis supporting the articles of impeachment that I drafted and placed before this House, and other members who were holding positions of leadership in the House of Representatives signed on to the articles of impeachment. So the tide had turned, and there was little choice but to go along with what the people wanted, not what we were doing at the time, but what the people wanted and the people were demanding. So I'm very proud to thank John for what he has done to assist. But there's also another person who provided me with some very sage advice, someone that I have great respect for and have admired over the decades. Ralph Nader. Many of you may not know the name, but Mr. Nader was a crusader for justice of the highest magnitude. He took stands when others wouldn't even speak the words that he stood on. And I'm proud to thank him for what he has done to assist in helping me to draw conclusions about these articles of impeachment. So let's preview the impeachment process and the articles that I intend to introduce. I said I would, and I will. First, let's start with what is impeachment? I think that because this is something that people hear about, and a good many people will conclude that articles of impeachment must contain something related to a constitutional crisis. There is no necessity for a constitutional crisis to impeach. None. You can, but most of the articles of impeachment have not related to a constitutional crisis. The first person to ever have been impeached was a judge. And it wasn't because there was a constitutional crisis, it was because of his behavior on the bench. And because he was consuming alcohol at a time when he should have been taking his lofty position and adjudicating appropriately. No constitutional crisis. Not only do you not need a constitutional crisis, you don't have to be convicted of a crime. And that doesn't have to be a codified criminal statute that has been violated. None of that is necessary for impeachment. No need to commit a crime. Best example, my colleague who used to sit right over there on this row, at the end of this row. My colleague who sat there, I was here with him for more than a decade. The Honorable Alcee Hastings. He was a federal judge. He was tried and found not guilty of alleged offenses. After he was tried and found not guilty of alleged offenses, his colleagues put together a committee, and they drew a different conclusion about his behavior. They took their conclusion to the Senate of the United States of America, to the House of Representatives, and my dear friend and brother was impeached. Impeached and removed from office. But because I am a believer, I often say there is a God. He was thereafter elected to the Congress of the United States of America. The point is, however, notwithstanding him having been found not guilty, the Senate found reason to impeach him. And he was impeached for something that he had been found not guilty of by a jury of his peers, pursuant to the Constitution of the United States of America. You don't have to be found guilty of a crime to be impeached. Now, along this very line, I would say this in terms of being found guilty. That means that if you have been found guilty of crimes, you can be brought before this body if you fall within what the Constitution allows for impeachment. You can be brought before this body by way of impeachment. You can be brought before the Congress if you have committed 34 felonies. If you've committed 34 felonies, you can be brought before the Congress for impeachment if you happen to hold one of the offices presented to us by way of the Constitution of the United States of America, such that you might be impeached. 34 felonies, yeah, you can be impeached for that. But I'm not going to talk about those felonies today. I want you to understand something that Gerald Ford said about impeachment, former President of the United States of America. Because there are some people who have read the Federalist Papers. I've read them. I've read the words of Hamilton, the words of Jay, words of Madison. I've read them. And they now have come to these lofty conclusions about what impeachment is. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth about what it is, and I defy any one of these constitutional scholars to contradict with evidence that supports something antithetical to what I'm saying. Gerald Ford got it right, President. Got it right. He said impeachment, and I'm paraphrasing, these are not his exact words. He said impeachment is whatever a given Congress, whenever they vote for 218, majority vote of a given Congress, whenever a given Congress will vote in the majority for articles of impeachment on a given day, that will be an impeached person, because impeachment is whatever a majority of Congress says it is on a given day. Now, that was more close to what he said. Whatever a given Congress says it is on a given day. And a given Congress would mean a majority of the people voting for impeachment. There is no appeal. It is a political question by definition. And as a political question by definition, it doesn't go to another court if someone differs, or the Supreme Court. It goes to the Senate. And the Senate has the trial. This is why Andrew Johnson could be impeached in 1868, Article 10 of the Articles of Impeachment against him, for speaking ill of Congress. You can be impeached for saying bad things about Congress. Andrew Johnson was. So let's get one thing straight. All of you constitutional scholars who want to convince people that there is some lofty definition that you have studied for some number of years, and now you've come to conclusions that most people can't understand. My dear brothers and sisters, impeachment is whatever a majority of Congress says it is on a given time, on a given day. That's impeachment. So if Congress chooses to impeach because of the tie that you're wearing at a given time, I wear this tie. There's some people who don't appreciate it as much as I do. Be impeached. Now, members of Congress cannot be impeached. We're not included in the definition of persons who may be impeached. So now let's talk about impeachment that I plan to file. These impeachment articles have been drafted. I have gone over them. They've been in my hands for now some time that exceeds the finished product was actually in my hands for probably a week or so. But I wanted to do some additional things, so I checked, and I've changed and added a few things. But I've had these impeachment articles, and there's a target-rich environment when dealing with this president when it comes to impeachment. So knowing where to start is the issue. Not is there a place to start, but knowing where to start is the issue. So I'll be introducing these articles of impeachment, and I'm just going to go straight to one of the articles or maybe the article. I've got options. I may delete some things when I introduce. But I want to just mention this option because it's the one that people talk about in words other than what I will present. They talk about this impeachment. They say that he's a threat to democracy. They say that he disrespects the Constitution. They say these things, but I'm not sure that everybody who says these things is truly interested in the consequences related to what the president should suffer for doing these things. I'm not sure that they want to see the consequences. I think that there are some people who literally just enjoy saying the president is destroying democracy. The president does not honor the constitutional provision related to respecting a person's right to a trial, fair trial, which brings along with it the whole notion that you just can't pick a person up off the street, send them to a foreign country with an indefinite sentence. Just lock them up. Pick them up off the street, take them to a foreign country, lock them up. Indefinite amount of time. There has to be some sense of reality associated with what we do, and I want to talk about that sense of reality. This president is defying court orders, including orders from the Supreme Court of the United States of America. He is defying. You've heard him say now in two venues. I'm going to speak about both of them briefly in just a moment. But he said in two venues that he's not going to honor the necessity for a person to have what we call due process. Two venues, he said it. Now, the president didn't come out and say, I'm not going to honor due process. No. But he has said what a reasonable and prudent person can conclude as his indication of not going to honor due process of the law, which is something the Constitution requires if you are going to take life or liberty or property from a person. Person has to have due process. It's got to be able to say, if you're going to take a person and lock them up, they've got to be able to say, hey, you got the wrong guy. And they ought to be able to say it to someone other than the arresting person. They ought to be able to say it to someone who has authority over the arresting person. You ought to be able to go to a disinterested third party. We call that the judiciary in this country. Some member of the judiciary or some judge go before a judge and say, Judge, you got the wrong person. You ought to be able to use the great writ of habeas corpus to get yourself before a judge. You ought not be taken out of the country before you have that opportunity. And then if you are out of the country, the Supreme Court can tell you that you ought to facilitate the return of that person. That's what the Supreme Court has said. And that's what this president is refusing to do, refusing to honor the Supreme Court's order. I call that in Article 1 of my articles of impeachment, devolving democracy within the United States into a dictatorship with himself as a de facto dictator. A de facto dictator. My friends, truth be told, we are now into a de facto dictatorship with a de facto dictator. Not a dictatorship that has been declared by some official body, but when the President of the United States declines to honor orders of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, he becomes the person who decides not only that a person should be pursued under the authority of the executive branch, he has now disregarded the separation of powers, and he's now encroached upon the supremacy of the judiciary, a co-equal branch of government. He dispenses with the necessity for the judiciary to perform its functions. And in so doing, he has become a de facto dictator. A de facto dictator. Now, this is not in my impeachment orders, but I have to bring this up because of the impact that he's having. I'll talk more about what's in my articles in just a moment. But I want to mention this. Could be in, but I want to mention this. He, as a de facto dictator, the president is engaging in de facto ethnic cleansing. The removal without due process. Oh, I know it's not the kind of ethnic cleansing that most people are acclimated to. Yes, I understand that this is a nouveau ethnic cleansing. Nouveau de facto ethnic cleansing. Removing people without due process to another country without the person being able to go before some disinterested third party and saying, you got the wrong person. Making the allegation that the person is a part of some gang of thugs. Well, a federal judge addressed that. A federal judge addressed that. And here's what the federal judge said. I've got it right here. I have it here. Here's what the federal judge said. So what? So what? You're a member of a gang? So now you're not entitled to due process? Due process is accorded you not because you are a person who is living the high life, wining and dining with the billionaire class, living in the sweets of life, having your galas, engaging in the various cocktail events, known to all of the people as an honorable person. Yes, that person deserves due process, but also every person in this country deserves due process if you're going to deprive them of life, liberty, or property. They are required due process under the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, if you don't respect the Constitution, well, then you can make these decisions, which is what the president does. If you don't respect the Constitution, you can decide that if you're a member of some gang, I can deport you to some other country, let's just say El Salvador, some other country. I can deport you to that country without due process because you're a gang member. Well, it won't be long before some person who's not a gang member gets deported. So this federal judge got it right. In essence, he said, so what? If this person's a gang member, still entitled to due process. I almost admire to some extent the way this president can persuade people to believe this level of inanity. This level of inanity, not insanity, inanity. How he's able to do this, because he's able to convince people that it's more who you are as opposed to what you've done is more important. If you're associated with a gang, then you've lost your constitutional rights. That's what he's inculcating in our society. He wants to make that normal. If you allow this to be normal, if we allow this to be normal, if I allow this to be normal, we are disserving the people, in my case, that I represent. The Constitution doesn't allow this, but this president thinks he's above the law. So he says, a member of a gang did some other dastardly deeds. As a result, he makes the case, this is what people elected me to do. Violate the 13th Amendment. Just get them out of the country. My friends, if you have noticed, most of the people who are being removed from the country, unfortunately, are Latinos. So now I take a stand for the Latino community. Because, Mr. President, you, sir, have caused Latinos to become suspect. I lived at a time when I was suspect in this country, when just being black in America made you a suspect. The Latino community, now I've talked to people who have no reason to be in fear, but they are, because they see what's happening. And they see who is happening to with a great degree of regularity. And because they see it, they are fearful of what can happen to them. And they are fearful that if they are not careful, they can be picked up, taken away to another country without due process. People are paying attention. If you can do this to one person, why can't you do it to another? And it looks like you're trying to get a certain group of people out of the country. Some of the evidence to support what I say, well, how about this? President wants to give people thousands of dollars to bring new birth to America, new lives, to birth babies, thousands of dollars. When you've got people who are already here, people who are already participating, paying into the tax system, persons who are abiding by the law, and now you have literally concluded that either they will leave by way of some of the things that you're doing that are antithetical to the Constitution, or you're going to force them to self-deport. Yes, I have many people in my congressional district that are Latinos. And yes, the president is trying his level best to get them to self-deport. So it's not just the people who've committed crimes that he's after. You don't have to have studied his behavior very long to see that it is people who are not of a certain ethnicity, not of a certain race, that he's concerned with. If he were true to what he says, he wouldn't be saying we've got to have more babies and then wanting to put millions of people out of this country who are law-abiding. Many of them we call dreamers, who came here not of their own volition, came here, made a life here. Well, didn't decide to come, but they're here, made a life. I've had to go across the border to bring people back that were deported improperly. But have these people here in this country, making America a better country by their very presence in the country. Not everybody's going to invent something to make America great. Work hard, treat people right. You can be a good citizen and make America great. You don't have to do the things that are going to be written across the pages of time. You can do the simple things, and these people are doing these things. They've made our lives better. So you want to kick them out, some by accusing them of crimes, never convicting them, sending a person never convicted to prison in another country, but others by bullying them out, using your bully pulpit and your agents, all of whom now speak with such a degree of disdain for people. It's just remarkable to hear them, the way they address the issues. That you have developed cohorts who have all become little bullies. They want to emulate you and your aggressive behavior in indicating what they're going to do to people. Okay, well, what you give, you shall receive. It'll come back to you. But the point is, you are removing people simply because of who they are, and you want to now increase the population by giving women money, people, that's husband and wife, two people, money, I suppose to. I don't know. The way I've heard it, I think it just sounds like he's expecting the one gender to carry this load, and it is it's a challenge if you're doing it just to get money. I would hope that people wouldn't say, well, I'm going to have a child because I can get $5,000. Probably there are very few people who will. But you're changing the dynamics or desire to when you already have people here. I wanted to mention this because this is a form of nouveau, de facto ethnic cleansing that the president is engaging in. Now, to the articles of impeachment, these articles have two places maybe three, wherein the president has confessed. One place where the president has confessed. How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman has 24 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One place wherein the president has left is, has expressed concerns that ought to cause all Americans to want to see some change, to see him have to be dealt with for what he said and what he's doing. I have in my hand a passage styled, President Trump meets with President of El Salvador. So there are three different things that I'll call to your attention related to impeachment. The first is this meeting in the Oval Office. Now, I'm about to read to you something that was published by C-SPAN. If you want the details, you can go to the actual event on C-SPAN and see what I'm telling you. So this is no secret. Some of the news media has picked up on it as of late, and they're talking about it. So here's what it says. Here's how it reads. Here's what it states. During an Oval Office meeting, and I'm going to paraphrase some of this, with the president of El Salvador, President Donald Trump and members of his administration argued that they were not required to return deported Salvadorian citizen Kilmar Abrigo Garcia. Some things bear repeating. I say this quite often. Seems like there's a lot that bears repeating. Not required to return this Salvadorian citizen to the United States, in spite of the Supreme Court ruling in favor of facilitating his return. Supreme Court of the United States of America, co-equal branch of the government, separation of powers, not required to return him, not facilitating it. That's what the president thinks, not required to do it, doesn't have to facilitate his return. And note that they said facilitate. There's a judge that has explained it in great detail what facilitate means. It's a beautifully written opinion. Goes on to say that the president, and I'm paraphrasing, of El Salvador, that he said he was not authorized to return Mr. Garcia. Now they're sitting in the same room. President of El Salvador, United States president, seated next to each other, juxtaposed right there next to each other for all the world to see, on C-SPAN if you want to see it. And so he says he's not authorized to return Mr. Garcia, who was legally present in the U.S. before being deported in March. That's what C-SPAN says, legally present in the U.S. Legally present, deported to El Salvador without due process. C-SPAN doesn't have due process right here, but that's what happened. Goes on to say, the Trump administration alleged that he was a member of the MS-13 gang. Well, I already covered that. Allege all you want about his behavior. It does not negate his right to due process under the law. I only regret that you're not sitting and standing right there right now, Mr. President, so that you could hear me say it to you to your face. He's entitled to due process of the law. Member of MS-13? Look, if he is and he's committed a crime, try him, convict him. Nobody wants to defend members of MS-13. But being a member of a gang does not deprive one of due process of the law. And it goes on to indicate here, but previously admitted that the deportation was an administrative error. Talk about adding insult to injury. The administration says we deported this person, not to demean him, Mr. Garcia, deported him by way of an administrative error. Made a mistake. Deported him by mistake, administrative error. But still you refuse to facilitate his return? What is wrong with you? Have you no respect for the Constitution? You don't have to respect Mr. Garcia. You don't have to respect me. But I want you to respect my constitutional rights. And I want you to respect his constitutional rights, because the minute I decide that it's okay for you to disrespect his constitutional rights, I've decided it's okay for you to disrespect my constitutional rights. Respect constitutional rights. Mr. Garcia merits that level of respect. But I also indicate in the articles of impeachment that this president demeans the judiciary. And I think there's much evidence to support my position. But what I'd like to do is give you what I see as some of the, well, a piece of the best evidence. Now, I believe this to be the best evidence. This is on Truth Social. I'm told that Mr. Trump is either the owner or one of the owners of Truth Social. And this is a tweet that bears the name Donald J. Trump. I don't think he's ever denied making this tweet. And here's what it says in part. It says, and he's talking about a federal judge now, this radical left lunatic of a judge. He's notorious for calling people lunatics. I was at home looking at TV. I'd been escorted out of the chamber. I was seated right over there. And when I made my comments about the president not having a mandate to cut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, Speaker did what was required of him. Officers did what was required. I'm not mad at any of them. When you protest, be prepared to suffer the consequences. You don't have to like them, and I don't. But I wasn't here, so I was at home. He uses that word lunatic, and he used it against people sitting right here on this side of the aisle. Called the members of the Democratic Party lunatics from that podium. Lunatics. He's never been reprimanded. He's never been sanctioned. This House could issue a resolution of reprimand if we had the guts, if we had the intestinal fortitude. To quote someone that I have learned to respect over the years, Malcolm X. If you just had the chitlings, you could reprimand him for it. Let him know that there are some lines that he can't cross. Let him know that he can't come in our house and call members of the Democratic Party lunatics, or call a member of the Senate Pocahontas. Let him know that there are boundaries. You can still get elected. So he uses the word lunatic here, and I'm going to read it again. This radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker, an agitator, who was sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama, was not elected president. That's the preamble. Now let's go down to the heart of it. He says, this judge, like many of the crooked judges, I have to say it again, some things bear repeating. This judge, like many of the crooked judges, I am forced to appear before. 34 felony convictions. 34. That's not here, so I'll read it all again. This judge, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. The President of the United States calling for the impeachment of a judge because he doesn't like the decision of the court. What about respect for a co-equal branch of government? What about separation of powers? What about honoring the law that you've sworn to uphold? This judge, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. We don't want vicious, violent, demented criminals, many of them deranged murderers in our country. Make America great again. This is from the President of the United States of America. It would be hard to convince a reasonable and prudent person who hasn't been through all of this that the president would say such a thing. The Justice of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, took issue with the president. The Chief Justice took issue with him. He sent a message indicating that we don't impeach judges because we differ with them. We appeal. But he's defying the orders of federal courts and of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. That's what he's doing. How much time, Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman has 11 minutes.
11 minutes? Did I hear 11, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, the gentleman has 11 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your kindness. So he's defying the federal courts. Once you do this, you become a de facto dictator. You reduce the country to a de facto dictatorship. And for this, you must be impeached. The articles will go into many other aspects of this, but for these things, you must be impeached. These articles of impeachment I shall bring. I have said that I would and I will. But I want to give everybody notice right now. Take note of this. They will not be the only articles of impeachment because the president has done various things that merit impeachment, and at least I'm going to build a record so that posterity will know how some of us stood during this time of crisis when the president was violating the Constitution. So I'll be bringing at least one additional occurrence where there would be articles of impeachment presented to this House, maybe more than one more, but I'm not going to allow this Congress to escape having a record of what this president is doing. So yes, I'm going to bring my articles of impeachment. And I know that the president, once he hears the things that I've said, he'll try to find some way to weasel out. Oh, I call that pickpocket politics. When you catch the pickpocket trying to lift something from your person, and then you decide, oh, well, I really wasn't taking that, I'm sorry, just bumped into you. Well, the president always tries to retract. And what I'm amazed at is that the media will allow him to take the last thing he says as what he really meant. You'd never do that for Barack Obama. You'd never do that for God bless him, the last president of the United States, the Honorable Joe Biden. You'd never do that. But you take the last thing this president says, regardless of what else he says about how he's going to enforce his tariffs and what he's going to do with them. Once he sees that it's not working and he starts to retreat, he starts to meander back, to crawl back, then you take that, oh, well, the president really meant this. What he was saying before was to acquire a bargaining position. Well, Canada didn't think so. Canada didn't think it was just a bargaining position when he said he wanted to make Canada the 51st state. Greenland didn't think so. Why do we want to think that what this man says last is what he meant at first, when what he said at first totally contradicts what he said at last? It makes no sense. So, Mr. President, you shall have articles of impeachment presented by Al Green, member of Congress, because I'll be fulfilling my constitutional responsibility to do so. And still I rise, Mr. Speaker, proud to be an American, with great respect for the country I love, and I ought to be proud of it, proud to be associated with it, proud because my ancestors were sacrificed for more than 240 years to lay the foundation for the greatness of this country, the economic foundation. They were sacrificed. They were enslaved. They have never been given the honor and respect that they merit. We have respected days in this country that I appreciate and respect. We respect Pearl Harbor with a Pearl Harbor remembrance. We respect 9/11 with a 9/11 remembrance. We respect the Holocaust. We have a Holocaust remembrance. We need a Slavery Remembrance Day to give honor and respect to people who were brought here in chains, kept in bondage for more than 2 centuries to lay the economic foundation for this country. They had a hand in building this Capitol, a hand in building the White House, built roads and bridges, planted the seeds, harvested the crops. These are the people who laid the economic foundation. They're the economic foundational mothers and fathers of the United States of America. I'm proud to be a descendant, a scion of the economic foundational mothers and fathers. So I hold this. I hold this because there are people who would silence me if they could. Censured, but not silenced. My voice is going to be here as long as there's a breath of life in me and I'm a member of this body. I plan to make sure that history records the truth about what's happening during these times. And there'll be many of you who will want to read what is now my manuscript, but will become my book of the times. The challenging times we live in. Censured, but not silenced. People assumed that I was going to walk out in shame. But I know this. Dr. King went to jail for his protestation. He didn't want to go to jail. He was censured, incarcerated, but not silenced. Rosa Parks took a seat in a racist southern town, taken to jail for simply sitting on a seat on the bus that was vacant. Taken to jail. She didn't want to go to jail. Rosa Parks, censured in a sense, imprisoned, put in jail, but not silenced. There are some people, I don't claim to be a Rosa Parks, I don't claim to be a Dr. King, but I do claim to be one of the many people who will be willing to be censured, who are willing to have to suffer, but I won't be silent. I will continue this fight. People expect us to fight even when we can't win. It's not a question of whether you're going to win, it's will you take a principled stand? That's what the times require. A principled stand. Yes, there may be consequences. Don't hurt anyone. Don't destroy any property. Get in the way, as John Lewis put it, the Honorable John Lewis, whom I got to know well. Yes, get in the way. You may get in the way and you may have to suffer the consequences. You don't have to like them, but there are times when we have to suffer the consequences for the good that we would do. The Honorable John Lewis called it good trouble. I am honored to engage and to have engaged in this good trouble. Mr. Speaker, I proudly yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas yields his time. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the President of the United States. Under the Speaker's announcement, policy January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, is now recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, and as always, I apologize to the board staff who I will try not to speak like a machine gun. Mr. Speaker, we're going to do basically three things. I'm going to make fun of us. I'm going to actually walk through some debt deficit numbers, interest, those things that are scaring my economists, myself, half to death. And then I'm going to touch on some of the, and it's a technical economics term, the bedwetting in regards to the reconciliation budget and how people are making things up. So let's have at it. Because I sit in an airplane 10 hours a week and I have some weird reading habits, I actually came across a paper written last year, published just recently. It's in Nature Human Behavior. So one of those quirky, those academic. But it actually, what they did is they went back to the late 1800s and they took all of our congressional speeches up till 2022 and they ran a data set on them. They ran AI, and could you believe, Mr. Speaker, can you believe it? They figured out that our congressional speeches have become less and less and less based in facts. I know this is hard for us to believe, but apparently the quality of idiots, people like me getting up in front of these mics and doing presentations and walking through our job has crashed in quality, in facts. Matter of fact, they use the word intuition. I basically say we make public policy now by our feelings. Because God forbid we go to our voters and tell them the truth about the math. So it made me feel better because I have mocked us for years about how much in the way of public policy we now make on feelings, because it's great television. It gets you followers on social media. You get a hit on cable television tonight if you're willing to make crap up, but do it with passion and feelings. But if you actually want to talk about the math of what's going on in this country, turns out it's how we're rewarded now as elected officials. Now, what was interesting is they had the curve actually starting to fall in 1970, and it's just gotten steeper. So part of it, and part of my conclusion is television, then moving to cable news, and then moving to social media, we have crashed the diet of robust facts in our speeches. So now that we're going to make fun of ourselves, let's go on to the next thing. Mr. Speaker, and for anyone that asks, we've been running the current data on how much we're borrowing. What would you guess we borrow per second right now? We're right now, looks like we're burning $72,000 every second. We're borrowing $72,000 every second. My best guess right now is we will borrow 7.37% of the entire economy this year. And try to keep that number in your head, because we're going to come back to that in some charts and explain why that's so devastating. It's like we just don't care about people's retirement, our kids, the next generation, and how the hell they're going to actually cover any of the scale of debt. And then we lie about what drives the debt. And Mr. Speaker, our best guess is we go from that $72,000 a second this year to maybe about $82,000 a second next year. And this is hard for people to want to accept, but it's the math. Over the next 10 years, the baseline borrowing was about $22 trillion. Now we have what we're trying to do in figuring out how to extend the expiring tax provisions. We have the requests from the White House. We have other disasters, other things we're trying to cover. We're basically right now looking at, and I'm going to show this multiple times, the United States, what it took us from the day we were elected, Mr. Speaker, how much debt? We will double it. We will double 240 years of borrowing in this 10-year period. The majority of that borrowing over the next 10 years is interest and Medicare. But God forbid, we're not allowed to tell people the truth. Most of the debts, deficits, and demographics is the fact we got old. We stopped having children. We have a shortage of young people in the country. And we're terrified to tell our brothers and sisters the truth about the math. So let's have at it. For anyone out there that's paying any attention, and this number actually probably right now is a little bit worse. We now think it's actually about 75% of federal spending is on autopilot. So you become a member of Congress. What you get to vote on, everything is borrowed. When you vote on non-defense discretionary, when you vote on defense, every dime of that's borrowed. And about $400 billion of what is mandatory spending, which means formulaic. You work so many quarters, you get your benefits. You served in the military, you get your benefits. You're part of a certain tribal group, part of our treaty obligation. You have certain things coming to you. But the things we vote on and the things we try to balance the budget over, okay, well, we need more money for defense. We have threats in the world. Okay. You get down to, we're trying to balance the budget on about 13% of our spending because we're terrified to talk about everything else. You can't touch interest. I'm going to show you a slide here in a moment. This one should scare the crap out of people. And I know my language is becoming more and more inflammatory, but I can't seem to break through. This is from something called Moody's Analytics. Okay, it's one of those fancy subscription services. They have a bunch of economists. They collect data. They have us in 9 budget years. 30% of U.S. tax collections go just to interest. So you pay your dollar in taxes, 30 cents of that in 2035 go just for interest. Does that not scare anyone? When the interest growth is bigger than everything we're talking about and trying to say by multiples, we calculate this year, this fiscal year, one we're living in right this second, we can spend $1.1 trillion, $1.2 trillion in just interest. There's a data set that if we do some of the things, if we were to do the Senate's reconciliation budget with almost none of the pay-fors, in 10 years, interest could be a couple $1 trillion a year. The annual deficit will be $3+ trillion a year. We're probably going to be, what, 2.3 this year. Last year, for every dollar we took in tax collections, take a guess, what did we actually spend? Took $1 in tax collections last year. What did we spend? We spent $1.39. We take in $1, we spent $1.39. This year was supposed to be better. We were only going to spend, I think, $1.36. I mean, it was supposed to get. We have a small problem with some of the GDP growth numbers. Just that adjustment, we may have just lost $200 billion in tax receipts in this fiscal year. Into September, between now and then. It just shows you how fragile we are when small movements of interest, when you have to refinance $9 trillion. Thank you for hanging out with us. Welcome back. But think about this. A single point of interest on U.S. debt, and it takes years for it to roll in because of how much we have to refinance. So we'll take about $9 trillion to market this year and refinance. We'll issue a couple trillion new this year. A single point of interest over 10 years costs you $3 trillion. Why does this not scare the crap? Why do we not have people coming behind these microphones? But we're better off getting behind these microphones and telling passionate stories, anecdotes, those things, because that's what gets us on social media. That's what gets people's dopamine hitting. But at some point, the math is going to win. And when we have the really smart analytic firms coming and saying they're scared about U.S. sovereign debt, you see things happening around the world that make me very nervous. The appetite for going on the long end of the curve. Look, the United States sells very short-term debt, and then we have 2 years and 5 years and 10 years and 20 years and 30s. But we're having real trouble selling the debt on the long end of the curve. And do not pay attention to some of the debt markets over the last month or two. You want to know why? Because we're in extraordinary measures. We're up against the debt ceiling. We're not issuing new debt. We're only issuing refinance. And what comes due within the cap? What happens a couple months from now when we all raise the debt ceiling? And I love the brain trust that goes, don't raise the debt ceiling. Did I just mention last year for every dollar we took in, we spent $1.39? Just tell me what 39% of the federal spending you want us to stop doing. Because when you don't raise the debt ceiling, we got to end all that. So it's more than a third of all of our spending is functionally borrowed. Just tell me, happy to do it, just tell me which third you want us to stop financing. And those are the very people filling up these hallways demanding we give them more money. What happens when we raise that debt ceiling, Mr. Speaker? And we have to come to market, Treasury has to come to market with $500–600 billion in functionally to catch up, refund all the accounts they've been borrowing from. That's what you do in extraordinary measures. You grab every account, use that cash, now you got to refund it, and you take that much to market. We have one analyst who's saying you will see a pop in U.S. interest rates, maybe on the 10-year hitting 5. Just boom! Because suddenly you're grabbing so much of the world's capital to finance what we've been borrowing internally that now we got to pay back. So just be prepared. These aren't surprises. We all know it, but no one reads the damn documents because it's math. And it turns out, telling the truth, remember our story here, that fact-based discussions on this floor no longer get you elected, no longer are listened to, no one cares about, just make things up because feelings is now how we make legislation. And this board is almost a year old, but it was to try to make a point to to our brothers and sisters, particularly on the left, that keep coming to us, just tax rich people more. And you show them, and we're going to show the slide here, but I'm going to probably have to say it 2 or 3 times so it sinks in. We have a report, detailed report, that sort of walks through every tax hike the left has proposed. And look, we're guilty on our side. Every cut we've actually proposed, but you take every tax hike and then you do the economic data on it, and you get about 1.5% of GDP. Okay, our cuts come out to about 1% of GDP. If I can do that math, that's 2.5%. Do you remember in the beginning of this? We're borrowing 7.3. So the next time you get a politician say, well, just raise taxes on rich people, and then you show them that it's a fraction of what we even borrow every single day. Great rhetorical use of language. Horrible math, completely fraudulent math. Remember, it's demographics, but we're not allowed to tell people that because it means we as a society have to do hard things. So look, I have this chart here, and I was just trying to make a point. How Washington finances 366 days of spending in 2024. The top 20% of earners covered 201 days. The next quartile down, the next 20%, covered 41 days. The middle earners, so the middle 20%, they paid for 17 days of government spending. The bottom 40% pay for 4 days of government spending, and then 103 days we financed by just borrowing it. We have, I think we are now tied for the most progressive income tax system in the industrialized world. When we modernized the tax code in 2017, the United States income tax system actually became more progressive. But yet, how many times have you heard members around say, well, they gave money to the rich? The rich after 2017 were paying more of the federal income taxes. At some point, we're going to have this really uncomfortable discussion. Is it on the tax side or the spending side? Because I've done entire presentations here on the floor where I've shown you, go back the last 65, 75 years. Here's a time of very high marginal tax rates. We take in about mid 17% of the economy in tax collections. Very low marginal tax rates. We take in about mid 17% of federal taxes. It's sort of, you go up, the actual economy slows down, this is what you take in. So the secret is, how do you adopt regulation and modernize it? How do you adopt tax policy that incentivizes productivity? How do you do the whole thing and get them to interact so you maximize economic growth, and that growth becomes your tax collection stability and gets you to the top of the total dollar amounts, but you're probably going to still constantly fall back into that mean of the percentage of the economy. So have a bigger economy. It's not that complicated. But you constantly, so upper income taxpayers overwhelmingly finance the federal government. Okay, I know this isn't good politics. People like me are supposed to say, yeah, the rich need to pay their fair share. Okay, top 25%, the top 20% of earners pay 25.2%. The next quartile pays 15.8%. The middle covers 11%. The fourth quartile down, so the next one down, covers 5.5. Bottom 20% of income earners, we send them money. Remember, we have sort of this negative income tax system, earned income tax credit, those things. So if you're in the 20%, the bottom quartile, we send you money. Matter of fact, we have a whole day, I didn't bring the chart, that shows functionally in America, if you're in the bottom half of income earners. Look, post-inflation, your life is miserable because wages haven't gone up as fast as inflation did. But that inflation was substantially created by stupid policies from the previous White House, and the Democrats who spent like crazy, and we financed, we dumped that much cash into society, you set off inflation. It's your high school economics class. And here we are a couple years later, and the poor are still poor because we still haven't gotten wages growing faster yet. And what scares the crap out of me is I'm now seeing some data saying we may have a year where inflation could be hovering around 4% by the end of the year. We got to do policies to get those wages growing. But I have a chart that will show you the bottom 50% pay about 4% of the income tax, but the bottom third actually get money. And in some ways, that's just being compassionate. But we have the data from post-2017 when we did tax reform, when we had the miracle of income inequality starting to really shrink. We had 3 years there where the poor were getting dramatically less poor. Why isn't that moral? Why isn't it good regulatory policy, good tax policy maximizes that velocity? So let's really annoy some of our leftist brothers and sisters. This is there's an article on the Manhattan Institute written by, I believe, Jessica Riedel. It's now about a year and a half old. But what they did is they went through basically all the proposals the left has on raising taxes. And step by step, here's the tax raise, here's the economic effects, here's what you actually take in. Remember our rules about size of the economy, 17.1, or mid 17% of the GDP. Individual income tax, investment tax, raising the corporate taxes, raising the state taxes. When you got to the end, you functionally were getting about 1.5% of new tax receipts for the economy. Okay, all right. I look forward to the Democrats, actually proposing this and actually being willing to vote on it, because they throw these things out, they get them scored, they controlled everything here a couple years ago. Do you notice they never did them? But pretending this solves the problem, so you get 1.5%, you will have stagnated the economy. You already hear the discussions of how close are you to stagflation, which is partially driven because of the economics. And remember, at the end of the decade, or with 9 years or so, 23% of the population is 65 and up. We have a demographic issue for productivity. The point of showing this chart is the solutions you will hear if, God forbid, you go on left-wing cable television, sometimes even right-wing. They're mathematical lies. We're borrowing 7.3% of the economy this year. Are we willing to engage in a revolution of using technology, modernization? How many businesses still run themselves as if it's still the 1990s? Government does. I had someone bring me just the other day a piece of healthcare paperwork. I think it might have been from the Indian Health Services. It was 3-part NCR paper for a purchase order for a healthcare procedure that you fill out, and I think you faxed it in. Have we lost our minds yet? You get protesters from the left saying, don't use technology. You've seen the article after article of the 5 major databases the United States have. None of them talk to each other. If you're willing to actually read, you saw the stories of Small Business Administration having, 3,300 people that had taken out loans, except the small problem is all of them were 114 years and up, meaning they were onto their rewards. They weren't with us anymore. Turns out those $300 million in loans no one had paid a dime back, but Small Business Administration didn't have the ability to bounce off the Social Security mortality or death file. We've designed these walls to functionally, it's as if the fraudsters designed our data systems here in the federal government. Let's go fill out things, let's go get money, let's steal the taxpayers' money, but we're going to make sure that there's no way to check the data that's being filled out because we want to protect the privacy. Some of that's not privacy. You're asking for a government-insured loan over here, and you can't check the death file? What idiots allow this to happen? And yet you get protesters in front of your congressional offices saying, don't let DOGE and those actually make the system work. I'm sorry you're scared of change. Did I mention to you we borrow $72,000 a second? How do you convince our brothers and sisters across the country, we as members of Congress, the administration, the bureaucracy are taking it seriously if you're not even willing to make the data talk to each other? And so back to one of the things that has just annoyed the crap out of me. I used this board a handful of times for some of my left-wing protesters the last couple of weeks. And to the credit, some of them were actually shockingly intellectually honest, saying, oh, that's not part of our talking notes. No one told them the truth. Guys, it's on the internet. Trust me, I'm not that bright. I just looked it up. It's there. You can find it. The baseline of the next 10 years, we were going to spend, the federal government baseline was spending $86 trillion over the next 10 years. $86 trillion. All we're talking about in trying to modernize and change spending in this reconciliation budget, if you did the high end, so the House full all-in high end, which please God, let us get there. But the high end is $2 trillion. 86, we're trying to get 2. That's 2.3%. And that's creating the bedwetting. Did they really love their money, the spending? But remember, if you don't want tax hikes, I don't want tax hikes. Borrowing is a tax hike. It's just paid for in the future with interest. Stop thinking borrowing is free. My wife and I, we've adopted a couple kids. I have a 2.5-year-old. We're incredibly blessed. It looks like he's going to be fine. He's going to be normal. He's absolutely a joy. When he's 22 or so, just to maintain baseline spending in the United States, you have to double every single tax. That's the morality of this place. For the lobbyists, for the groups that are walking our halls saying, we want more spending. Don't do this horrible, devastating 2% cut in spending over the next 10 years. Thank you for screwing over my 2-year-old. Your absolute immorality. If you're going to walk into our office and demand more spending, tell us what you think, where we can modernize, where we can change the cost of government. We've come here and done presentations that the single biggest expense we have in government, turns out it's obesity. We did a whole model for the last couple of years, huge amounts. Remember, I chair the Joint Economic Committee, so I have like 5 PhD economists. We did the data, 9.1 trillion additional healthcare costs. Turns out the morality, if you'd help our brothers and sisters be healthier, but you got to do through the Farm Bill, you got to do through nutrition support. You're going to have to decide, are we going to have access to glutides and other things, but are we going to use technology, the wearables, the other things? I have one of those data rings on. What would happen if one of the most powerful things you can do for U.S. sovereign debt stabilization is a healthier society? And somehow that becomes a fringe conversation around here because people make money off of our brothers and sisters being sick. It's absolutely perverse. If you actually go, I think it was a year or so ago, I think it was Goldman Sachs did this huge report on GLP-1s, glutides. And somewhere in one of the footnotes was sent to me, and it had this line, a couple lines, saying if there was wide adoption and the United States actually became much healthier, much less morbid obesity, that there would be healthcare systems that would go bankrupt because they wouldn't have enough multi-chronic sick people to pay their bonds. Think about that. Everything's about the money here, not about the morality of having a society that's growing and prospering. Prosperity, I would argue, Mr. Speaker, is moral. How much of the crap we do here is not just satiating today's, Twittersphere screaming at us, or something that's completely made up, but actually building a plan saying, here's the prosperity we're going to build for the future. Sorry. I probably have already had too much coffee today. And this is just to make a point, and this is more to mock the Senate. And I was talking to one of the senators last night who also is concerned like I am. Maybe they hear our voices. So, Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And these are just the base numbers when they were first scored. This number actually came in half that. No interest is attached to it, but we stole this from someone else, but it was to make a point. Democrats complained about that. CARES Act, we complained about the excessive spending. The American Rescue Plan, we complained about. Then you add in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. It wasn't that bipartisan. I think they had just a handful of Republicans who wanted projects in their district. But you add it all up, all the things we have fretted over the last decade, and they don't even add up to the amount of borrowing that's in the Senate reconciliation budget. Because it's so much easier here just to spend and just borrow it. There's this attitude here, give it to me now. Oh, you guys will figure out something in the future. And for anyone out there who's, look, I've actually, we've worked with some of the Doge folks because I have The Economist, but go on their official website right now. They think next year, 2026 fiscal year, we can save $160 billion. That's real money. But it's only, if we borrow $6 billion a day, 24, 23 days of borrowing. That's everything we've gotten. There's this inability for members of Congress, our staff, the public, to understand the scale of what we're up against. This basically just reiterates what I'm going to show a couple times here just because I need it to sink in. If we do the Senate reconciliation budget with our baseline, we double U.S. debt in 10 years. I'm going to say it a couple times so it sinks in. Debt held by the public, and they're using 2034. We prefer to use 2035 because that's more of an honest budget window. But you start to look at what the Senate resolution, this was baseline debt. They add another 32.7% to the debt. And if we do what the Senate put out in their budget reconciliation, we functionally double publicly held debt in the United States. What took us 240 years to do, bless us, we can do in 10. Because we're good at borrowing money, handing things out, telling people there's no consequences, making crap up, saying it's health care for illegals. Okay, shouldn't do that. But it's only a couple days of borrowing over a year. You got to do lots and lots and lots of difficult things. And we've done entire presentations where we've shown you could revolutionize the cost of health care. We've actually looked at one data set, and we've been studying this now for months. If I came to you, Mr. Speaker, and said, just in Medicare, duplicative MRI scans, PET scans, X-rays, ultrasounds, could be as much as $25 billion a year. Duplicative scans. What if you got your knee scanned and you just attach it to this thing so it's portable with you? That's $250 billion over 10 years. Is that a cut? No. It's just a simple use of almost a free technology that's out there where you can load them on this and it's portable with you. We get lobbyists who don't like that idea because apparently they make money on the duplications. The inefficiencies, the frauds, those things are a business model now. When government controls functionally a quarter of all the spending in the United States, of all the GDP, and a big chunk of that is functionally waste and fraud and misallocations, bad design, give it whatever anachronism you want or title you want. Many of the lobbyists that are walking these hallways are here to stop us from modernizing the system and bringing it into this century and just using the technology. You walk around with a supercomputer in your pocket. This could crash the price of health care, make you healthier, give you access, all these things. And there's an army of people trying to stop us. Remember, telehealth here was an absolute war. There were millions being spent to stop it because it screwed up people's business models. And I'm going to do this a couple more times, and then we're going to do one more example. If we do what's being planned right now, you finish the next decade, well, 10 years from now, either 73.7 trillion dollars of debt, or our other chart actually gets it up to $74 trillion of debt. So when you hear a member on the Democrat side, Republican side, running for office, I care about the debt, but I'm more afraid of telling you the truth of what drives the debt. And the fact of the matter is the people walking the hallways here, often our own constituents, are screaming at us for more spending. Don't they have kids? Don't they even care about their own retirements? The absolute vacuousness of immorality. So I grabbed this from the Wall Street Journal. So I can't imagine anyone here has had protesters and people showing up in their office about Medicaid, which is supposed to be our safety net for indigents and the poor. I have some old experience with that. For a short time, I actually chaired the healthcare committee in the Arizona State Legislature when I was a child. For a while, I actually worked on the access budgets, which is the Arizona Medicaid system. We do something unique. We functionally buy managed care HMO policies for our poor people. It's actually shockingly efficient. Matter of fact, if you took the rest of the country and adopted the Arizona model, you could save hundreds of billions of dollars over those 10 years. But the Wall Street Journal did us a favor. They actually took the Arizona system, which actually has a shockingly high satisfaction rate, good outcomes. We can make it much better. But the punchline here is they're showing something called a provider tax. This was a scheme, and I have to openly admit, on part of it, which was the disproportionate share, this is geeky stuff, I was actually part of managing that many years ago. I was county treasurer, I managed money, and we were part of the swap. But part of the scam out there is raise the cost of health care, create a tax, capture that tax, and because you raise the price, you also capture more money from the federal government in their percentage match. What the Wall Street Journal did was brilliant. They just produced this chart that says, do you know the Arizona government, and this is most state governments, actually use this provider tax washing machine. They make money. They actually take in more money. They're not meeting their obligation of, it was supposed to be a partnership. It was supposed to be a match. Is this a cut? It's just saying, look, there was a deal made in the late 60s that we were going to share some of the risk and some of the cost with our poor on providing health care. Then when Obama came in, they did this expansion and 10%, even though it was going to people who were still work eligible and those things. But then states, and this, we all knew this was going on, but it was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to be when coming out of a major recession, we were going to go back to normality. And instead, it's padding for state budgets. That cash isn't going into health care. It's financing other things and raising the U.S. debt because this is borrowed money.
Would the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
I'd be happy to share time in the time that I have after the gentleman from Arizona. I want to thank the gentleman from Arizona for his steadfast devotion to highlighting for the American people the state of our fiscal health, which is not good, and the extent to which we're complicit in it. And I want to just point out that this thing that the gentleman from Arizona is talking about is so central to everything we're trying to deal with right here, right now in Congress. And if we don't fix that, then we will have failed. I want to be clear to my Republican colleagues. If we do not fix this scheme, this scam, the gentleman didn't misspeak. It is a scam. If we don't fix that, we will have failed. Let me just ask the gentleman a couple of questions.
Shoot.
Prior to the existence of Medicaid, right, there was no federal subsidy at all. This scheme couldn't have possibly existed in this way.
Yeah, most of this was designed late 60s.
Right.
My state I have this weird history. I was a child, I was early 20s. I was a temporary page at the state legislature. Arizona was the last state to enter Medicaid.
Right.
It was bankrupting our counties because up to that point in the early 80s, the counties were actually the provider of health care.
Right.
So we entered this, but we created a really crazy system saying we're going to do managed care to drive the price down. But yes,
and so Medicaid was created, and Medicaid was created to ostensibly provide an avenue for health care for the poor and vulnerable, right? It's a broad statement. Is that true?
The actual language was for indigents. It was mostly for women and children.
And it was supposed to then be a shared arrangement between the state and the federal government, correct?
And in the early days, it was like a 50-50, not 100%
and so
coming
now
from the federal government.
Fast forward, and the current vulnerable population, okay, what we call the vulnerable population, the indigent, the poor, those who need it, single moms, people who are sick, the frail, that population, even under today's law, gets a federal, we'll call it match, it's really a formula, a match of 50 to 70%, depending on the jurisdiction.
Yeah,
is that correct?
It blends out closer to the 70. And now talk about the expansion population.
And so then now let's fast forward. What we're really talking about for everybody at home watching C-SPAN, all 14 of you, we have a situation where Obamacare expanded the Medicaid population, and it expanded it massively to a population that is much bigger and much more able-bodied, i.e. healthier. So now you would think, well, I don't know, is that good or bad? I have my problems with it facially, but even if you were going to do it, would you then say, as it does, that that population, the healthier, able-bodied population, should get 90% match from the federal government? Because that's what's happening. They get a 90% rate for that expanded population. Then layer on top of that, and I'll yield back, this is what you're now dealing with. The gentleman's chart that the Wall Street Journal did, where you have the provider taxes, you have this high rate that they are able to collect, and they're juicing it using the provider taxes. They get this 90% federal dollars, and then they're openly, California, for example, has stated they are gaming the system to get federal dollars to use that to subsidize illegal aliens and to people who are not the vulnerable population, and frankly, to put it in their general budget. That's what the gentleman's talking about. That's the current state of affairs. I yield back to the gentleman from Arizona.
No, and Mr. Roy, it goes further. So as we all get the paid for, have you had the occasion yet, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Roy, where a group comes into your office, somehow they were put on a plane, put in a hotel, those things here, they have no understanding of the mechanics, but somehow there were Medicaid providers in your state that had plenty of cash laying around to fly people out to come lobby.
Right.
And then, so we did this. We pulled open, here's another Wall Street Journal article from a week or two ago, talking about how many in the Medicaid systems here in the United States are enrolled in multiple states. So you actually have billions and billions and billions of dollars here. They're enrolled in multiple states. And even the discussion of, could we just match data? And you actually get objections to this because the fraud is part of the profit model. So I'm on Ways and Means. This is something Energy and Commerce is their primary jurisdictions. They're working through it. But if you just stack up the cheating, the misuse of the vacuousness, the absence of data to try to deal with the multiple enrollment of populations, if you actually start to stack these things up, how dare you call those cuts? How dare you? And why don't you care about the future of this government, the future of this society? We cannot handle the stacking of debt. Did I mention the $72,000 we borrow every second? And it only goes up. We have a model that says in the 10-year window, we're up somewhere in the mid-90s per second in borrowing. And we're terrified to tell the truth. Well, Mr. Roy, you may not want to be in the room for this one, because this is the stuff that gets you attacked at home. But it's math. It's the truth. It's the CBO numbers. Rising Social Security and Medicare shortfalls nearly drive the entire 2019 to 2033 deficit. This board is a couple years old, but the facts are the facts. We're terrified to tell the public the truth. The primary driver of debt is demographics. Go to CBO, and this board is actually today, we're waiting for the update, but we've done some back of the board math. The math is much uglier because interest rates are up substantially from when we calculated this 2 years ago. But you functionally have a country that, and so this one's from 2 years ago, the 30-year debt, we were going to borrow $124 trillion. If you remove Social Security and its finance costs, Medicare and its finance costs, the rest of the federal government actually grew slower than tax receipts. These numbers, and we'll probably have the update on this from CBO in the next couple months with the higher interest rates, the higher running debt. We have models now that say over the 30 years we're going to be at 200% of debt to GDP. That number is no longer 124 trillion, maybe 170 trillion of borrowing. I don't know how many of you plan to still be alive over the next 30 years. Do you really think the world financial markets are going to finance our debt? You have Ray Dalio, the multi-billionaire hedge fund who's now retired, who's actually been coming here to Congress saying, warning, warning, the entire world's capital markets, because what China's borrowing, what Japan's borrowing, now Germany's going back into the debt markets, there's not enough capital in the world. When the United States is consuming 30 to 40% of all the money that goes to sovereigns, to governments, there's not, so what happens when there's a shortage of savings in the world to finance? Well, we can print money. Of course, that will set off inflation, so your life just becomes more miserable. And because so many of our benefits are all inflation indexed, you can't inflate yourself away from it because they go up. Or we can just pay the higher interest rates. Well, now you already saw the beginning chart that Moody's says in 9 budget years, 30% of our tax collections is interest. We have a model that shows a 1% increase rolled into our refinancing. In 10 years, 45% of all U.S. tax collections, all of it, is interest. Mr. Roy, Mr. Speaker, yet you have members here running around saying, I need more money for SALT. I want actually more money for this program. I want more money for this. Okay. Bring us ideas of how we modernize spending, how we can reduce costs by technology, by better systems, by a healthier society. But stop showing up at my door demanding more spending. There's no more money.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Please.
And I don't want to take away any of his thunder.
No, it's because you actually just stopped me from cursing, so you did good.
The question I have for the gentleman, when I graduated from law school at the University of Texas in 2003, the national debt was somewhere in the $6 trillion range, $6.5 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
When I came to Congress, when I was campaigning to come to Congress, it was just over 20 trillion. That was 2018. Today, we are pushing 37 trillion. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, if you add in internally financed.
Correct.
The CBO says we will end this year at about 37.2. My number is 37.3. So yeah.
So now I bring that up because nobody at home understands that. You're doing a good job trying to put it in context,
12 zeros.
Trying to explain it about the amount of money we're borrowing per family or taxpayer or per second. But to put it in stark terms, what we're talking about with the debt and the deficits, what it really means is the inability to afford a house for the average American, right? Because the impact that flows from it is, as you alluded to, higher interest rates, an inability for the Fed and for Congress to continue to borrow and print money because of what you're describing worldwide, the ability to have people to buy our debt goes down. The cost of debt is going to go up. The interests are going up. Inflation is going up. And the average American family is going to take it on the chin. That's what we're talking about. And the reason I bring that up is because our colleagues, as you point out, run around here saying, I need more money for the program. I need more money for fill in the blank. I need more money for Medicaid. I need more money for SALT. Why? Because they feel like they've got a political interest in doing so. I'm sure the gentleman had, like I did yesterday, the Farm Bureau coming into your office and needing help. Guess what? I understand why they need help, because we, the federal government, have messed up their lives quite vociferously.
We distort.
And so they want help. I get it. But then what do? Vote for food stamps? I'm a cancer survivor. You know that. And I have cancer groups coming in asking for money. I look at them and I say, well, can you go find some way to pay for it? And a lot of my colleagues don't want to do that. And I'll close with this. President Reagan had a great quote on the Johnny Carson show, late night show in the 70s, before he was president, in which he said, every program that a politician brings forward should have to come with a tax increase attached to it. Why is that? Was President Reagan pro-tax increases? I know the gentleman from Arizona knows that not to be true. President Reagan believed in tax cuts and more money in the pockets of Americans to create wealth, to create economic growth. But why he said that was because we promise things we can't deliver. We promise things that we deliver that are fake because we're doling out money, printing money to pay for programs, and then on the other side of the ledger, we never want to say we need a tax increase to pay for it because we rightly understand tax increases constrain the economy. In other words, in short, we put ourselves in the box we've created. I yield to you.
I want to try to, we use the term socialize. How do I get it part of our folklore, our use of language? Borrowing money is a tax hike.
Correct.
You got to understand. Okay, you're not going to raise taxes. I despise raising taxes.
Correct.
I want as much velocity in the economy. A classic free market economist.
Yep.
But borrowing money is a tax hike. And it's a tax hike with interest on it.
Yep.
It's just to be paid at a future date. But because the curve is now steepening, remember, I just showed you some charts that says we may double U.S. debt this decade. The curve is like this. You don't think we're not going to reach in and take some of your retirement? This is no longer about your grandkids. It's no longer about your kids. It's you. But I believe the political class has lied their backsides off for so long, or we play this game. You will see some people on social media, you could save $1 million doing this. Okay, you borrow $250 million an hour.
Yeah.
$250 million every hour is the borrow. Watch out for the scam artists who play the game. They give you something that's outrageous. Okay, get rid of it. But sometimes the things we will debate for hours here are minutes or sometimes seconds of borrowing.
Yep.
But the big stuff, because there's so many lobbyists and constituencies that live off that money, you're not allowed to talk about that. And look, Mr. Roy, look, I'm blessed. I have Phoenix and Scottsdale. I have one of the best educated districts in America. I have them fairly prosperous. They tolerate me. They sometimes aren't happy with what I say.
Yeah.
But at least they know my math is good.
Would the gentleman yield on that? One of the things that I've been saying in this building for the last several months is this debate about what we call, I think somewhat wrongly and incorrectly, mandatory spending, because it's not mandatory. We've just chosen to put it on autopilot. It's automatic spending. It's not really mandatory.
Yeah, it's a better name.
And so I've been saying in this building repeatedly that the math has to math. The math has to add up. And is that, would the gentleman agree, the fundamental and core problem in this town when we're talking about the state of affairs? So for example, we in this process have taken Medicare off the table politically, but the president has asked us to take Medicare off the table. We have taken Social Security off the table because by law, we are not allowed to touch Social Security in the reconciliation process. And then interest is off the table because you got to pay it. You can't just magically not pay the interest. So that adds up to what? About 47% of the total frigging budget, half the budget.
Yeah, and just understand in reconciliation, which is the one time we're allowed to talk about mandatory spending, the majority of mandatory spending we're not allowed to touch.
Correct.
Because if you use Social Security and interest, that's probably 54, 55% of all mandatory. Sorry, it's a weird way I remember numbers.
And so,
but I can give you, so let's actually, let's risk our political careers. How many of you have read the Wall Street Journal articles from the last year? I think they've done 5 or 6 major exposés on something we call Medicare Part C. It's the Medicare Advantage. It was the sort of managed care version within Medicare option that was developed by Republicans in 2005. One of their articles basically says they identified about $63 billion of waste, fraud, misalignment a year.
Right.
A year.
Right.
A year. Yeah. The MedPAC report, because I'm the only idiot who came here to the floor with the MedPAC, but it's partially my responsibility being Ways and Means. The MedPAC report, all highlighted, and we showed the MedPAC report says Medicare Advantage, the Part C, is coming in at 120% of fee-for-service. Just that delta from where it was supposed to be at 95%, I know there's a lot of numbers, when we designed Medicare Advantage, long before you and I got here, it was supposed to come at 95% of fee-for-service. That 25% delta is $100 billion a year, and if you do the curve, because of the growth of the program it's expected, that's $1.5 trillion over 10 years, just putting it back to what it was supposed to be. It's equal to everything we're talking about trying to reform in our reconciliation packages. How many conversations have we been willing to have saying, hey, you do realize we could modernize Medicare Advantage so the incentive for the providers is to have populations be healthier than running around and scoring them as sicker. Just align the incentives. I just found you $1 trillion. Why can't we have conversations like this where we're trying to preserve the programs and the future at the same time?
The gentleman was asking a rhetorical question.
Yeah,
and
you don't have to answer that because the moment you answer, there will be an army of paid lobbyists, people running ads in your district, probably now beating the crap out of me on social media because when it's that sort of money, you know they're going to, and you also saw the articles 3 weeks ago, Wall Street Journal, there's criminal investigations now going on. Justice Department now is diving into these folks. So there's more going on here. I will argue, Mr. Roy, and some of our friends who are fiscal conservatives but also want to modernize the delivery of services, help me. We've spent almost a year diving into the data. What would happen if fixing these misalignments, the waste and fraud, actually it doesn't get us where we need to be, but it starts moving us the right direction? Mr. Roy, I think I'm actually against my time, so I'm going to do that moment. I'm going to first apologize to the folks that had to try to take our words down for talking too fast, for the poor speaker that had to sit here and listen to this, and to my staff that's now going to have to write lots of apology letters for all the people I just hurt their feelings. But with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from Arizona yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, for 30 minutes.
I thank the Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from Arizona. We've engaged in a colloquy on his time. I'm going to start my 30 minutes. He, of course, is welcome to stick around a little bit if he wants. And I'm going to just jump off from where he started, or I'm going to start from where he left off. And that is to talk about what we're debating on the floor right now, which is the reconciliation bills that we are debating in the House and in the Senate as we speak. Now, for the average viewer out there, you don't understand what we're talking about. Let me put it in basic terms. The reconciliation process is a part of the Budget Control Act, which basically gives us the ability to reconcile current policies with what we're dealing with respect to our spending, debt, deficits, right? We have to make that all add up, and we're supposed to do that in a way that would yield deficit neutrality or deficit reduction. That's the general purpose of why we have reconciliation. Reconciliation, though, because there is a 60-vote threshold in the Senate, and that means certain policies that the majority wants to get in place in the House and the Senate, if they control both chambers, often hit resistance by the minority party in the Senate, that then reconciliation is used to end run what we call the filibuster, even though it's really just a 60-vote threshold, end run that in order to get policy, even though we're supposedly not doing policy on reconciliation. That is how stupid your Congress is, America. That's how you're developing policy, through a bunch of arcane procedures, some of which are great and designed to have cooling effects, some of which are really stupid. But what we're doing is trying to find every which way possible to avoid accountability and responsibility, and that is, as I've been putting it around here to reporters and getting reported out, to do basic math. Because that is, in fact, our obligation, is to do basic math. And unfortunately, a whole bunch of my colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle and a whole bunch of my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle refuse to do basic math. They want to say that through magic fairy dust and through money trees, they can just wish away the reality that we're going to have a certain amount of inflows and a certain amount of outflows every year. And you want to know why we're $37 trillion in debt, or soon to be? That's why. Now, we're having a big debate, America, on what we should do in this so-called reconciliation process. We are going to have tax policy in there that's going to affect our tax revenues to the government, but more importantly, affect the tax bill you receive. Let me stipulate for the record, when I am attacked a lot in the coming weeks for saying allegedly I want to have tax cuts go up or have taxes go up, I am emphatically for cutting taxes. I would like to zero out the tax code, eliminate the income tax, get rid of the IRS. I would like to do all of those things, and I have legislation to do it. And I will vote for tax cuts, but I refuse to ignore math. If you're going to do a certain amount of tax cuts, which will create a certain amount of economic growth, yes, you still have to model how much revenue will come into the Treasury versus how much you're spending. Because my Republican colleagues love to spend. They campaign on tax cuts. They deliver on most of the tax cuts. They campaign on balancing the budget and cutting spending and never do it, ever. In the history of ever, with the possible exception of the late 1990s, when the Gingrich Republicans, combined with Clinton, and by the way, a dot-com economic explosion, to deliver us a balanced budget. And they did it through welfare reform and through some spending constraint. And that is the only time in modern history when we've done it. Here's the problem. This chart shows you what we're dealing with. A whole lot of people are saying, well, Chip, you and all these fiscal hawks, these fiscal conservatives, you guys want to do all these massive cuts, and we can't do it. And it's crazy what you want to do. Let me be clear what we're talking about. We're currently running close to $2 trillion deficits. If we do all of the crazy stuff we're trying to do, we will be running what? Close to $2 trillion deficits. That's the truth. That's what the models show. That's what we know. So look here. These are the projections of the way things will be if we do nothing. The blue line, we do nothing this year. We let the tax cuts expire, taxes go up. Let me repeat, I'm against that. Taxes go up, revenues are projected to do what they do, and we will have the amount of debt over the next 10 years you see here, growing from almost 30-something trillion dollars, growing all the way up to $50 trillion, okay? Now, what do these other lines represent? The orange lines, those lines are the House bill. The red lines were the Senate bill. Well, we just did a thing where we combined the House and the Senate bill into one budget. We're now negotiating that, and this is all yet to be determined. Why am I saying all this? No one wants to read all this. Nobody's going to pay attention to a chart. All my staff, everybody says, don't use charts on the floor. Just go down and say things that will get clipped and sent around. Well, let me try to say something that will get clipped and sent around. Even if the House Republicans are successful in working with the President and the Senate to achieve the $1.5 to $2 trillion in spending restraint over the 10-year budget window, which is a mere $150 to $200 billion a year, even if we're successful, we're going to massively increase the debt in the United States all the way to well over pushing $50 trillion by the end of this budget window. That's it. If we fail, then debt will go up a little higher. We have an obligation to do better. Everything we're fighting for right now in the House is for crumbs. I haven't decided whether I'll vote for it or not vote for it. Why? Because I'm one vote out of 220 Republicans. I'm one vote, and I got to figure out how we build a majority and how the Senate builds a majority, and then work with the White House to get a bill signed. I recognize that. But there's a limit that I can accept. And so somebody asked me, I just want the whole world to tell me, should I vote for a bill if we're successful at fighting for what we're fighting for, on Medicaid reforms, on unwinding the student loans, on cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, on finding savings and fees on illegal aliens here so that we can pay for continued enforcement of the law at the border. If we're successful in all of those things in terms of revenues and expenses, I'm still going to burden my kids and grandkids with over $50 trillion in debt. All right, what does that mean? Well, it means more interest. It means likely higher inflation. Because at some point, we can't afford this. That's the fundamental question. Now, I've got a bunch of my colleagues, to the point of the gentleman from Arizona, running around saying, well, we can't touch Medicaid. Well, why can't we? Medicaid was expanded under Obamacare, which we all opposed. And the Medicaid expansion was a big reason why we opposed it. So why can we now not demand reforms to the broken pieces of Obamacare that expanded Medicaid, such that we are giving 90% federal match to the able-bodied, the people who are not the most vulnerable, compared to the vulnerable population who only get 50 to 60 to 70%? Like, why would we do that? Why would we give more to Medicaid recipients than Medicare recipients, which we often do? Why would we continue to allow states like California and other states to game the system to get federal dollars sent back in a money laundering scheme, as has been reported widely by the Wall Street Journal and others? They're openly and knowingly doing it. Why wouldn't we fix that? Why wouldn't we apply eligibility rules and work requirements combined with lowering that abusive federal match rate, subsidizing blue states to game the system when they're using federal borrowed money to prop up their weak state budget? Why wouldn't we fix that? I don't have a single constituent I know who thinks we ought to continue doing that. And even more so, let me see this chart. My colleagues are running around and say, well, they give into these arguments that we're somehow cutting Medicaid. That's a lie. Now, we could have a debate about whether we should actually reduce Medicaid and give more money in other places, or free up the states to provide better service, or empower Americans to go get the doctor of their choice and be able to afford health care without having an employer or government-provided insurance-run bureaucratic system enriching insurance bureaucrats and pharma and hospitals, because that's what we have. We don't have free health care anywhere in this country. The freest country in the world, you do not have the freedom to go to the doctor of your choice. You don't. The average family in this country is paying $25,000 a year to go to insurance bureaucrats to tell you what handful of doctors you can go to, what lousy deductible you get, what ridiculous copay you have. And I've got a constituent who died from cancer last year who couldn't go to MD Anderson because she was covered on covered on Obamacare. Think about that. Covered on Obamacare. Sick with cancer, can't go to the best cancer hospital in the world 2 hours from her house. That's your healthcare system. And we won't touch Medicaid? Our budget contemplates Medicaid going up 25%. I'm not going to say whether that's good or bad, but can we at least just have the backbone as a Republican Party to not allow our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the media to say that we're cutting Medicaid when we're increasing Medicaid spending? I mean, it is mind-boggling that we allow that narrative to set in on a program that is broken, that has $1 trillion of improper payments, that is ripe with abuse. What are we here for? I mean, that'd be my question for my Republican colleagues. Why did you run for office? Because I don't recall Republicans running on a big platform of the government is the solution to all your problems. I don't remember growing up as a child of the 80s listening to Ronald Reagan, or frankly listening to President Trump's speeches saying, oh yeah, man, we really love government bureaucracy and all the great things it does for the people. Nobody runs on that. Not a single Republican has run on increasing deficits. Every single Republican has run on balancing the budget. Yet every year we vote for more spending. Every year we vote for more debt. Every year we increase deficits and add to the debt. Every single year. Yet, and I want to get right to the chase here, because for the last 2 months, some of us have been willing to walk out and say that we will not vote for the tax cut extensions if we don't get spending restraint. And I'm getting lots of Republicans around town who like to stir the pot and going and say, well, you're going to vote for a tax increase, are you, Chip? Oh, we're going to hit you hard. We will come after you for voting for tax increases. But they won't say a thing about voting for the inflation tax increase on every American family while they run to the hills on spending restraint, because they won't do it. That's the truth. I didn't come to this town for more of the same. The men and women who walked into a wall of bullets in Normandy, they didn't do it so that we could have $50 trillion of debt and destroy our own country from within. That's what's happening. This country is weaker because the very individuals entrusted to defend her, defend the Constitution, and be responsible stewards of the Treasury have failed them and continue to fail them. And let me be very clear about the budget we're talking about right now. Let's put that back up real quick, if we don't mind. Thank you. You see what happens to the debt under our budgets. They go way up. But I'm not accounting for the other things. What are those other things? Well, this budget, the House budget, it assumes that we're able to figure out how to hold what we call discretionary spending flat. I don't know if the Speaker is the only other person in the chamber with me, believes that we'll hold discretionary spending flat, but history would say we wouldn't. But our budget assumes that we hold discretionary spending flat. That's defense, DOJ, DHS, all of the spending on all of the various programs in commerce, and go down the list. Okay, well, what else? I read a story yesterday that because of tariff policy, and by the way, I support the president using tariff policy to isolate China and restructure our worldwide trade that has been being abused by friend and foe. But I just read a story yesterday that they're planning on how to bail out farmers from tariffs. Well, remember, 7 years ago, we had to spend $25 to $35 billion to bail out farmers for tariffs. This last December, we spent, I don't know, $30 billion or something in a supplemental bailing out farmers. All right, well, what happens when, we need more money for California wildfires? Or what happens when there's a hurricane that hits Florida or, apparently North Carolina, Tennessee? Is that $5 billion, $20 billion, $30 billion, $50 billion? You see, Congress does not have the ability to say no to spending. So let's bring it all back. Should I vote for a reconciliation package that will almost certainly guarantee $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion of deficit spending because I'm getting certain crumbs in cuts in certain committees, and the only reason that I've gotten said crumbs was because we threatened to stop the extension of the tax cuts in order to force the question on spending? Look, I want to absolutely applaud the great work of a whole lot of committee chairs and my Republican colleagues for the work that they've done to identify spending restraint and savings. Education, they found a bunch of savings. I can go through committee by committee. Last night, we added a lot of fees to pay for border security and stuff in the Judiciary Committee. There are other things we could do. But the math is still going to have to be math. We are going to spend about another $300 billion in this bill for defense and border security. That's another $300 billion. We're going to find savings of allegedly $1.5 trillion over 10 years. So that's $150 billion a year. What that means is we're already in the hole. We're already in the hole. By 2035, the United States will be spending more on interest per year than all federal programs aside from Social Security. Right now, federal debt is so large, 40% of all personal income taxes go to paying interest on the federal debt. Think about that. We have over $1 trillion a year in interest. Spending drives inflation. In 2024, the typical American family needed an extra $17,000 a year to maintain the same standard of living as January 2021. We have increased spending, our budget, our federal budget, from roughly $3.6 trillion or so in 2015 to almost $7 trillion now. That's an 80% increase. Does anybody alive think that we can sustain this? Do any of my colleagues, Republican or Democrat, think that we can sustain this? Does anybody alive right now in the chamber, if you're in the complex and you haven't hopped on a plane to fly home because we had our final vote on a Thursday morning and we're going to come back on a Monday night in our usual way of doing things in the swamp, not doing what we should do, does anybody believe that this is going to save the fiscal health of America? Like I said, I haven't decided if I'm going to vote for it or against it. That depends on a lot of variables. Does the Inflation Reduction Act actually repeal the ridiculous subsidizing that are enriching the Chinese and enriching billion-dollar corporations and undermining our energy security? Do we have the resources necessary to secure the border and the fees to pay for it? Are we putting in the provisions that we ought to be putting in there to guarantee that we're going to have the president be able to carry out his campaign promises to remove aliens? Are we going to have transformational reform to Medicaid so that we eliminate the 90% ridiculous subsidy of the able-bodied while we're giving a much lower rate of 50 to 70% to the vulnerable population? Are we going to continue to allow the provider taxes and the gaming of the system, the money laundering that is allowing money to go to California to be gamed and to be doled out to illegal aliens and put in their general budget as they openly brag? Or are we going to fix that? Are we going to fix the debacle that is the higher education system? Are we going to restrain their ability to abuse federal grants, student loan subsidies? Or are we going to continue to subsidize Harvard, Yale, the Cal Berkeley, University of Texas, Austin, University of Virginia, both my alma maters? I don't care. I'd cut them off. Take away their money. Are we going to continue to do as I heard, which is to create additional taxes on cars? Or are we going to fix it? Literally, in order to pay for the Coast Guard and air traffic control, I heard that the T&I committee, they were poised to put a vehicle tax on every vehicle in America. Limited government, constitutional Republicans were going to tax your car. Well, we fought and said, well, that's a bad idea. So they got rid of the tax, the $50 tax or $20 tax, whatever it was, on internal combustion engine cars, which, by the way, we are subsidizing EVs and hybrids and so forth in order to get the internal combustion engine off the street. But now we're going to tax the EVs that we're subsidizing, unless we repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. These are the tangled webs that we weave in a government in which politicians promise to give away free stuff. As I've said before, we're not the United States House of free stuff. You can't just print money and give it to people and say, oh, we'll take care of your problems. Yet that's what we do. Our best case scenario, if we pass this reconciliation package, is still $50 trillion in debt in 10 years. Like, that's literally the best case scenario. I think it's much worse, especially if our interest is going up and we refinance our debt at higher rates, which seems likely. But here we are, just nibbling around the edges, begging for crumbs. Please, oh please, please give me $150 billion a year in savings on a $7 trillion annual budget, up almost twice in a decade. Bloated and expanded under COVID. Bloated and expanded under both Democrat and Republican regimes. We've had an extraordinary first 100 days. The president has turned around the ship. We're securing borders. Apprehensions are down 94%. We're resetting our position in the world stage diplomatically, economically. We're rebuilding our military, which was being decimated by the previous administration, unwinding DEI, rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in government, firing bureaucrats, identifying all the things that ought to be cut, and that is a good thing. And Congress, my colleagues, are doing some good things. We've passed some good bills that are hitting a wall in the Senate. The SAVE Act, the injunctions bill, a bunch of CRAs to undo the damage of the Biden administration. We passed 5 this week to undo the damage of the EV mandates. We've got to stay on offense, and we can, and we're doing a lot of great things, but this reconciliation bill, at a bare minimum, can do no harm. And literally that is what we're begging for, ladies and gentlemen, when we're trying to fight for $1.5 trillion in spending reductions, not even cuts. I want to be clear. I want to remind everybody about Medicaid. Medicaid, there it is. It's going up 25% in our budget for better or worse. I can make arguments, but just, it's going up. So can we at least speak truth that it's going up and that we're begging for crumbs to get $1.5 trillion in reductions over 10 years? We're going to spend $86 trillion over the next 10 years. We're just trying to save $1.5 trillion of that massive increase for crumbs to have $50 trillion of debt at the end of that rainbow. I hope we'll come together. I hope we'll unite to deliver a product that is worthy of support. I have not decided whether I'll be able to support it. We will find out whether it has what is needed. I do want to take 1 second before I yield to my friend from California to honor a dear friend of mine who passed away a couple of weeks ago. Diana Denman, often called the godmother of the Texas Republican Party. She passed away on April 17th at the age of 91. Now, I don't do a lot of the floor speeches on individuals because I feel like if I do them for one or two and I don't do them for everybody that I represent, that gets tough. Obviously, veterans, police officers, there are things that rise to the occasion. Diana was a legendary mentor, not just to me, but to many of my friends, many of the people that work for me, many of my staff. She played a major role in the political evolution in Texas, where Texas went from a historic Southern Democrat state to a bastion of conservative Republican politics and a warrior for freedom across the globe. I was proud to have her support, but more importantly, I was proud to have her friendship. She worked closely with some of my dear friends in politics and former bosses like Senator Ted Cruz and Governor Rick Perry, both of whom are dear friends of mine. She led a storied life. She rode her horse into the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C. She acted in Hollywood, where she would go on to meet future President Reagan when she was in Hollywood in that golden age. She held many positions in the Reagan administration of the 1980s, and she stood strong against the Soviet Union and the Soviet aggression around the globe. She was truly one of the last cold warriors, and I mean that in all of the right and good ways. As a child of the 80s, I consider myself a proud cold warrior and believe very much that we need to stand against aggression in the same way President Reagan stood against that aggression and stood for freedom and as a beacon of hope around the world. But I think we could learn from that era, as I learned from Diana, about doing things through peace, through strength. I will miss Diana, and she'll be remembered for her fierce patriotism and her strong convictions. She was feisty. She was committed. She loved her country. I want to thank her for her steadfast commitment to the conservative movement, to the United States, to defending our country, and in service of the Lord Almighty. I'll keep fighting to live free, and I'll remember Diana through those actions, and I will miss her dearly, as will many of my staff who counted her as a mentor. But when I think of the people who have devoted their life to the cause, and they come, and then they go, and they pass, and I'm reminded that we're here for these fleeting moments. What will be our legacy? What will be the legacy of this generation? Are we going to put this country back on a sustainable path? Are we going to actually honor our constitutional commitment to have a limited government in which people can live free? Are we going to constrain the appetite for unchecked spending and the racking up of debt and the deficits and the interest that are killing our economy, our country, and frankly, the futures of our own children? Or are we going to choose the harder path, right? As President Reagan said in 1964, it was a time for choosing. Frankly, we didn't actually heed his call. We chose poorly. We chose the path of a massive bureaucratic, tyrannical state. We've empowered government. We haven't reduced it. We've increased spending. We haven't reduced it. We should actually honor that time for choosing. And in the memory of my good friend who served with President Reagan, let's reignite that call for time for choosing, to choose that path, to choose the path of the Constitution, of limited government, of freedom, of responsible spending, and turning over this country to our children better than we inherited it. And with that, I will yield back.
The gentleman from Texas yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's good news for Americans when it comes to gas prices. They're down, about 50 cents since last year. But unfortunately, this good news does not extend to Californians. As you can see here, we remain a stark outlier with by far the highest gas prices in the country. As of just a couple days ago, gas prices in California are 29 cents higher than second place Hawaii, an island state. Third place is Washington. Our gas prices are 52 cents higher than Washington. They're 88 cents higher than fourth place Oregon, 94 cents higher than fifth place Nevada, $1.16 higher than sixth place Alaska. This is truly astounding and is one of the main reasons why it's become so hard for people to get by in our state. Now, it's no mystery why this is so. California has by far the highest gas tax in the country. Our cap and trade program adds a huge amount to the price of each gallon, as well as the requirements of our fuel blend in California. All of these taxes and regulations combine to give California by far the highest gas prices in the country already. And now we've just learned that another refinery is closing. So 2 refineries have announced they are shutting down in California thanks to our insane energy policies. This certainly is not going to help matters. It is time for Governor Newsom and the California legislature to restore just a little bit of common sense when it comes to our energy policies, because we cannot afford for these trends to continue. Indeed, it's one of the main reasons that people have been leaving our state in record numbers over the last several years. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to provide an update on the non-existent high-speed rail project in California. As I've noted on this floor before, I've introduced a resolution or legislation to cut off all future federal funding for California high-speed rail. I was with Secretary Duffy when he announced an investigation into where the recent federal funding has actually gone. And I have called upon the FBI Director Kash Patel to launch an investigation into what happened to the $17 billion that has already been spent. At this point, the cost of the project is estimated to be about $100 billion more than it was initially sold to the public. But we did get some news this week. And maybe I've been a little too unkind to high-speed rail. The new CEO, and by the way, this is the 5th CEO, so there have been 5 more CEOs than there have been riders. 5 CEOs, 0 riders. The new CEO came out with some exciting news. He announced that he has a goal by the year 2045 of completing the line going from Palmdale to Gilroy. So let's parse that statement. A goal of 2045 going from Palmdale to Gilroy. Well, 2045 is, of course, 20 years from now. I'll note that when the project was passed in 2008, it was supposed to be done, the entire thing, by 2020. So the whole thing was supposed to be done 5 years ago, but now the CEO is saying, I've got an exciting, ambitious plan. We're going to have Palmdale to Gilroy completed in 20 years. And this is just the goal. There have been a number of goals in the past in the tortured 17-year history of this project, and they've blown right past them, missing deadline after deadline with more cost overruns than we can even keep track of. And then finally, when you look at what his goal, which is very unlikely to actually be reached, is, it's to go from Palmdale to Gilroy. So where are these places? Remember, the initial project, it's supposed to ultimately go from Los Angeles to San Francisco, the two main population hubs of California. Well, Palmdale is a ways away from LA. It's about 37 miles northeast of Los Angeles. So if traffic is good, it'll take you an hour in your car, or 2 hours if you're using existing public transportation. So think about this. You're taking our high-speed rail, which, by the way, isn't going to be that fast. It'll probably be the slowest high-speed rail system in the world if it even gets built. And then you get out at Gilroy, and you have to somehow have a car there and drive another hour, or you hop on public transit for another 2 hours of travel just to get into LA. And it's similarly on the north part of it. Gilroy is 70 miles from San Francisco, and you'd be going for at least another hour, probably more. You'd certainly be driving more than an hour after hopping off there if you actually wanted to get into the city. So of course I'm being facetious when I say that this is an exciting, ambitious plan. It is just another example of why we need to end this project once and for all. There is absolutely no reason that state or federal taxpayers should continue to fund a project that is going absolutely nowhere, especially when our roads are in such bad shape, among the worst in the entire world. It's time to redirect this spending towards transportation needs that will actually improve the quality of life for Californians. Mr. Speaker, an investigation by Cal Matters has revealed something extremely disturbing when it comes to the personal health information of Californians. It's been revealed that Covered California, which is the state's Obamacare exchange, its website had a tracker that was collecting the personal health information of Californians and then transmitting that information for marketing purposes. Specifically, the Cal Matters investigation discovered that trackers on the website of Covered California collected and sent personal information to LinkedIn through one of the company's trackers called an insight tag. This information included very personal health information, whether the individual was blind, disabled, pregnant, whether they used prescription drugs, their gender identity, whether they're a victim of domestic abuse, how often they sought care at in or outpatient facilities. A spokesperson for Covered California even admitted they installed these trackers as part of a marketing campaign. And the trackers, by the way, were not removed until this Cal Matters report was published. This illegal action was undertaken despite the fact that LinkedIn has publicly advised on their website that the insight tags, quote, should not be installed on web pages that collect or contain sensitive data, and that pages offering specific health-related or financial services or products to consumers that should not be there either. But despite these warnings, Covered California proceeded, and I believe this raises a serious issue under HIPAA, a law designed to protect the privacy of individuals' personal health information. So I have written to Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, to ask for an investigation into what happened in California, into how this was allowed to happen, and to any legal violations that may have occurred. Specifically, I'm asking Secretary Kennedy to investigate whether covered California violated HIPAA or any other laws. Who authorized the use of the trackers? What controls exist to protect privacy in California's Affordable Care Act exchange? How did covered California evade those controls? How many people have been impacted? Have they been notified? Has there been any restitution? Why did covered California use the trackers contrary to LinkedIn's explicit guidance? And I am asking how this sort of violation can be prevented in the future. This is truly unacceptable, and I look forward to getting some answers from this investigation. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to take a moment today to commemorate John Adams Academy for its inaugural Servant Leadership Award Gala, which is taking place this weekend. Now, John Adams is an exceptional school in my district. As a matter of fact, they have 3 schools now in Roseville, in El Dorado Hills, and in Lincoln, and there are hundreds of families on the waiting list. This is a charter school. And the school is so popular that there are hundreds of families who want to go there as well. If you walk through one of their campuses, you'll see quotes from the founding fathers on the walls, and you'll see all signs of the classical education philosophy that guides the school's instruction. I've had the chance to work with John Adams over the years in many ways. I've judged the Constitution Bowl at their school. I've been to their ceremonies for veterans. I've met with their student council and participated and helped judge debates that they were part of. It is truly a special place, and this Servant Leadership Award really embodies the spirit of the institution. John Adams was founded by Dr. Dean Foreman, and he is spearheading this Servant Leadership Award, which will be awarded this weekend. The inaugural recipient will be Mark and Marcus Haney. Mark Haney runs the Growth Factory in Rockland, which helps early-stage entrepreneurs build startup businesses. They work with them to build the funding case and leadership capacity to attract the capital and team needed to support scaling a high-growth company. And then his son, Marcus Haney, started Allegiant Vets, which is a way to provide for a bridge for veterans leaving military service to be integrated into jobs in their local communities. Mark Haney, his father, says, "We've imagined the impact that the most resourceful regional leaders could have if united to help one promising entrepreneur. The Growth Factory is the realization of that vision multiplied by 100. I'm a little biased in this respect because I have seen the impact that the Haney family has had on our community in so many different ways. And in fact, I honored Marcus Haney with the Veteran of the Year Award when I was a member of the state legislature. But I wanted to also give you a description that Dr. Foreman has given for what a servant leader is, because I think it's a timely reminder in these times, in many ways, of what we should aspire to in public service or in other forms of community leadership. So the description is as follows of a servant leader. Robert K. Greenleaf said, "The great leader is seen as servant first. A servant leader is a servant first, driven by an inner compass of virtues or core values, with a natural desire to serve and empower others. This is not about being subservient, but about sincerely wanting to help others by identifying and meeting needs. A servant leader has the gift of persuasion through moral authority, the principled use of natural virtues unique to them for the benefit of others, and also positional authority. Titles, credentials, and degrees give only the opportunity to lead, but it is the actions in behalf of others that can command, inspire, and motivate change and moral behavior in others. A servant leader has submitted himself to his higher nature and asks, 'What is wanted of me?' A servant leader has vision. He or she has knowledge of the past, recognizes what is needed to improve one's life, family, community, and world, and acts to bring about a better future for others. A servant leader applies true principles such as public and private virtue, natural law, liberty, life, personal responsibility, etc. A servant leader has the ability to build coalitions and inspire others to follow as first among equals. They see where things are in their condition as well as where they should be, and then they insert themselves to voluntarily move self and others toward the ideal. They model what they teach. They become leaders because of their examples and influence. A servant leader understands that life is not just a quest for pleasure or power, but of meaning. Meaning and happiness are found when one is dedicated to a cause greater than oneself. The servant nature is not bestowed and cannot be taken away. It is when one is deep. It is one that is deep inside. Once this is recognized, the servant intentionally chooses to lead. Servant leadership is about becoming. So I want to just say thank you to Dr. Foreman and John Adams Academy for providing this tremendous recognition. I'll look forward to seeing the award promote this idea of servant leadership in the years to come. And congratulations to Mark and Marcus Haney on being the inaugural recipients. Mr. Speaker, today I am calling on the House of Representatives to act with urgency to reauthorize secure rural schools. The program, unfortunately, because of the House's lack of action, has been allowed to expire. Even though the Senate did pass it last year, the House failed to do so. Secure rural schools provides critical funding for a number of counties in my district and across the country. It was enacted in the year 2000, and it compensates counties with large amounts of national forest land for lost revenue due to declining federal timber sales. The funds support local schools, roads, and essential public services. Congress reauthorized the program through fiscal year 2023, but as I mentioned, the authorization expired in September 30, 2023, and final payments were made in April of 2024. So Congress must reauthorize this to avoid critical funding shortfalls. For example, in some of the counties of my district, Plumas County relies on secure rural schools for $3.7 million, Sierra County for $942,000, Yuba County for $122,000, Nevada County for $393,000, Placer County for $839,000, El Dorado County for $2.1 million, and Alpine County for $493,000. Many of those counties are small counties. This provides critical funding that they need because they have a large amount of federal land and don't have a large tax base. And so I'm calling on House leadership and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to act with urgency to get this measure passed and make sure that these communities receive the funding that they need and that they rely upon. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Does the gentleman have a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until noon on Monday next for morning hour debate.